I've realised that this is the thing about dabbing that's so underrated. Is if you've never done it, right, it looks... The problem is, it's one of those things, right, for real, that looks really stupid.
Yeah.
It's kind of like dancing in some ways, you know. Like, it's very hard to sort of spontaneously dance and somehow from the outside not look a bit weird, you know. But when you're doing it, you know, it's fun. The whole bit is you don't think about what you look like. So here's the reason I know that, right? The reason I've actually been through the fucking looking glass, as it were, is that I also used to, because at CSGO events, we used to have a really big problem with that like 2 years ago, mate. Like every time the camera would go on, like especially American fans, they would just go and they weren't even just doing a dab, you know. They were doing that shit where it's like there's like a 12-year-old kid going like, and you're like, Jesus Christ, was this The Exorcist or something? Just going like that, you know. And also there'd just be some parent next to them like going like, it's like looking across disapprovingly. So anyway, obviously we all used to get really triggered in CS, and since we can be edgy there, people were just like going, like the commentators would just say it every time and just say stuff like, you know, friends don't let friends dab and all like, which was pretty funny, right? But here's the problem. What the thing that made us do it, right, is because I obviously also thought like, sort of fucking moron just goes to an event, starts dabbing and stuff. But then one of the casters in CS is called Sadikist, right? And he's one of these people where one of the weird things about his character is every now and then he'll pick some like really arbitrary thing like that, but then make it like really important to him. And so when me and Henry, his casting partner, realized that like for some reason it really got to him if people dabbed, we did it just like ironically at first, you know, like we just did it one. And then the thing is, he kept for some reason, kept coming up to us privately, like, why are you doing that? You know, you're just encouraging people. Like, if you do that, then they're going to think that. And so, obviously, we were going, oh, sorry about that, Matt. And then, obviously, like, next segment, you know, we'd be like, doing, like, all the fucking, you know, the complicated ones and shit. And so, obviously, it got out of control there. And I can't lie, Medic. That was actually the moment that I realised, like, it's the same reason why you should never do anything, you know, on a dare if you're young, because it's like the kid who like, oh, God, I'll try smoking once. It's like, you know, he's 40 years later, he's like smoking 10 packs a day. It actually is fun. I can't lie. Once you do it, it is. Yeah, exactly. That's the worst part, is because especially once you do it once, it does become like a fucking exclamation mark, doesn't it? So you start trying to like pop it in there for stuff. So, you know, I've been guilty of a dab or two in my time. You can put that in if you want, by the way. Yeah. It's not bad.
I know I've had similar things. Like yeet is a big like. I used it ironically at the start, and now I've used it in the middle of a cast once. So just like trying to yeet out of there. I don't understand why I do it, but I enjoy it, and it's fun. And you get all the messages on Twitter, people being like, "How on earth can you use those sorts of words? What are you talking about?" It's like, but I enjoy it.
And they don't realise as well that response in some mad ways justifies what you did as well.
It makes me happy.
It makes part of your brain go like, "Oh, some people don't like that. When can I do that again?" You have to realise I've got that button. I've been accessing that macro a lot in my life, Medic. Like, it wasn't just dabbing really that I got in that. That came later. But
yeah.
Are we going to do it then, Loco? What time is it now?
It's 4:14. Let's start.
What episode is this one? Like 30 something?
It's 39. I said 39 came out today, but that one was actually 38. This one's 39.
Okay.
You're having a hard time, aren't you, mate? You're having a hard time putting +1 on the last fucking episode. I don't know how he's got it wrong twice within the last like.
No, my editor got it wrong once, and then I got it wrong once today. That's it.
I mean, but if you've got it wrong twice now, then some of the blame has to lie on you. Your name's on the product, right?
That's the joke I always make, right? It's like it all just rolls off the tongue way too easily as a former coach, doesn't it? The way he goes like that, he goes, "Oh, this bloody player." I mean, the editor just didn't do what I told him that I said not to. You know, it's like the buck stops with you.
Okay.
The buck stops with you.
Let's start the show.
So I thought we started already. Right? This is 38.
No, this is 39. This is 39.
Yeah, he's joking, mate. He's joking. That's like sarcasm, but okay, whatever. Well, it's all right. That's the other thing, right? I've also made this point before. Again, I shouldn't have made this point because the reference was shit because he didn't understand it. I did make the point that this show in many ways is an esports Pygmalion, where I take Locodoco through the many different stages of basic shows and, you know, humour, like, you know, nuance, etc. Like, some of the first episodes, he was really just, like, thinking I was getting mad at him or some shit. Like, oh, are you really just not going to do the show with me anymore? It's like, what the fuck? What? Just because, you know, like, some point in the show, he'll have made some joke and I'll be like, well, just get someone fucking else to do the show then. At the end, he's, like, messaging me, like, you're not really going to quit the show, are you? Like, no, obviously not.
The first...
you'd see me just exit the call if that was the case, wouldn't you?
The first 10 episodes, all the comments were like, the show's not going to last, like, when Dorian's gonna get tired of Loco. Like that's
they
all
don't
the
know.
first episode.
They didn't know. They didn't know, mate.
And also,
Have you got some marbles to put in Loco's mouth at some point so he can practice his elocution as well?
Exactly.
Also, like the moment, like I don't even know Medic. I'll be completely honest. I don't know Medic, and then we just started following each other on Twitter, and then he messaged me because I talked about a headache once, and then the first thing he says to me whenever like we were setting up the show before, because Dorian was late, not me, Dorian was late. Medic's like, "Oh, so we roast you for 30 minutes." I'm like, dude, we just met, and but it's so natural for all the guests to just gang up on me now.
Right, the problem with that, because obviously, by the way, this is just going to be a casual start, guys. It's a soft start. You know, we're from the UK. That's how we do things nowadays. So I just want to say, for episode 39 of Us and Loco, right? This is where actually I'll start the episode with Mercy, and then later on the show, we'll move into the heavy roasting of Loco, because when he said there, like, I don't even actually know Medic, and then I just, reached out to him and that, he actually just means he doesn't know him on, like, he's not an acquaintance of his yet. He hasn't really talked to him, because obviously the easy fucking low-hanging fruit there, it's like, well, of course not Loco. He casts for the LEC, and you appear to have watched about exactly 3.5 games of that in the last 2 years. I think mainly just those Fnatic finals, was it not?
Well,
but I believe you have watched some of the games. Basically.
I tried watching.
The past.
I tried watching LEC, and then the casters started doing cringy stuff like Maddie, here to cast, and I instant muted, and then went
that's
to go
not
through
cringy,
the game.
That's
no, it is, but
of
that's
it,
the
though,
point.
right?
Yeah, that's the point. It's over the top.
I'm enjoying myself on the cast, so you can have fun listening to us, right? Like when we get into the game, like Fnatic G2, you listen to the last 20 minutes of that cast, we don't make a single joke, right? But as long as you start it off having fun, I don't really give a shit if you don't enjoy the first 30 seconds, right? It sets me in a good mood. I'm in a good place.
Oh, that intro was something else, though. I will admit,
that one was pretty shit.
And you have to realise, to be fair, like, listen, I know this all too well, Loco. Think about our current situation.
What?
He is part of a duo with Vidius, right?
Yeah.
You can't just go, right, Vidius, go straight from the part where you're like really good analysis to like hilarious, but in a way where people respect everything about how we're being hilarious. It's like no one can bridge that gap. So it's like you've got to gradually move through, So it's like at first you're going to be like, you know what, we're going to play up the fact that this is cringe. Actually, that's what's going to initially get people on board, and then maybe one day we can hit the thing where it's like they're laughing completely with us. Mm-hmm. It's like you got to go, baby steps. He knows that.
You got to distinguish yourself from Quickshot to Fisher, right? We can't all have the fake taxi moments or the bum slaps and that sort of shit. You have to work your way towards your own type of humor.
They are the sort of people who, in real life, you sometimes have some friends like that where it's like, separately, you're friends with each of them, right? But their own friendship together almost sickens you even as their friend. Just because it's like, that's just... I hate people who are just too naturally friends like that. Like, it's just too easy for them. It's like, I don't know about that. I prefer to work for my friendship. Start with like war, hate each other, and then gradually move towards something resembling a friendship or relationship.
I see. That's why we get along so well.
See, that was it. No one knew. Right. Obviously, this is an episode about the LEC. But the weird thing is, if you remember, obviously LEC was like 2 weeks ahead. I think overall, was it 2?
1 week. 1 week.
It was 1 week ahead at the beginning, and so as a result, obviously LEC's already finished.
Yeah,
We've just got the week off now, and then the playoffs is next week. So technically, this is the dead week. So one thing to note for this episode is, obviously, lots of stuff could change between now and then. Like, something mad could happen, like some player could get substituted or something. We can't know all that, but we're just going to still attempt to make predictions going forwards. So, Medics, let's start at this place.
Okay.
I feel like what we should do just before we get into the main part of the episodes, we've got to talk about some of the teams who didn't make it. Because normally, right, I would actually personally just say, in fact, this is the approach we're pulling the curtain back for a second. The approach I would normally take to an episode like this is, don't bother mentioning like Rogue and Excel. They were never going to make it. They weren't any good. Like, the best thing about them actually was that occasionally they won a game. That was it, basically. They had no expectations to win. But the problem is, Misfits is in there. Like, literally everyone thought Misfits would at least be at this phase. Like, here's the thing. Even if they didn't become an elite team, like, I legitimately thought they could have won LEC with the first put the lineup together.
Yeah, we all did.
But even if they hadn't, like, I could have never have conceived of them not making the playoffs. That just seemed impossible. Even in the last week, I somehow thought they were going to do, because, it's like Soaz and all these players, like, come on, this has got to happen, right? What do you think of this Misfits story?
I don't know, man. Like, it's just generally Misfits in the second half of the split across the last 2 years have been dog awful. Like, they went 2-7, 3-6. They went 3-6 again this year, and it just seems like they have really good coaching staff for the first 5 weeks, and then they have no fucking clue what they're doing for the second 5 weeks. And I don't know if it's like their mental goes boom. You know, you look at the team, there's a lot of emotional players there, or whether they just can't adapt to changes in the meta. Like when patch, I think it was 9.3 with the crit itemization came out, they never really adapted to that either. But just as a team, right, they didn't look like they were on the same page. They made some of the worst calls I've ever seen in League of Legends. A specific one, a Baron call against Schalke.
Yeah, the desperation one. Yeah.
What on earth is this team doing? It just, you look at the 5 players and you could sub anyone into another team, right?
That needs some sort of a name. I can't think of it on the spot, but that needs some sort of a witty name if there's someone out there. Like, it needs to be called something like, you know, the Desperation Baron that wasn't one or something, because that was the most ridiculous part of it, wasn't it? It was like, it wasn't even necessary to do it, and they just still threw the whole game off it.
Diabolically bad. I just don't understand how you make that call. Like, you've got, as you say, like Gorilla, Maxlaw, Soaz on that team. You've got Forbidden on that team. How on earth does the team go, okay, yeah, this is the right call? How does no one say back off? Because we listen to the comms, and Soaz is like, oh, someone plays a ward, let me TP. Everyone's like, oh, I don't have wards. He's like, okay, I'll TP to top tower, and Odoamne is just going to flank you and kill you all. Like, I don't know. It should be something about rabbits. That should be the joke.
I had a joke
suicide.
on like
it's the bunny suicide.
I had one about like myxomatosis like early on.
Oh, that's a good, yeah.
But no, the problem is again though, because it's like a literary reference, like half the audience like, what does that have to do with Dragon Ball Z though? Like, no, it's the way they all make fun of LS. He's straight in their wheelhouse. He actually knows the shit that he was also just a lost kid just watching the fucking TV, like with no books in the world, all just left on a shelf from all fucking dust collecting them, aren't they? So unless you put stickers in them, right, guys? So anyway, that's enough of flaming the audience. Loco, right? Give me your weigh in on your diagnosis here. What happened to Misfits?
Maxlor was bad. Everyone was bad, but Maxlor was especially bad. And jungler is kind of the, I would say, backbone for your team and the identity of your team. If your jungler plays early game very proactively, you are an early game team. If your jungler likes to farm early, then you can't really be aggressive if your jungler likes to farm early. So jungler is so much of your identity. If your jungler ganks bot a lot, then you're a bottom side oriented team. Maxlor looked so lost this split, and I have never ever seen him play this bad. As you said earlier in the episode, I'm not like an expert at BU, but when I did watch Misfits, I always thought of Maxlor as one of their standout players and as one of the better junglers and a more cerebral player of Europe. And god damn, he was bad this split. Like, not trying to cover for the other players, but I do think jungler being bad and jungle lacking just good shot calling or having the ability to gank, having the ability to play out mid game was a huge problem that Misfits had.
I think I have to agree with that. Like, you look at the teams that are at the top of the table, right? Broxah really stepped up second half in the split in terms of early game enabling mid and bot. Cold, I think he's the quintessential cerebral jungler in Europe because he tracks the enemy jungler so well and keeps Origin from dying early on. Xerxes has been really good in the early game and kind of bridges Splice to mid-late. And then, I mean, Jankos, you could pick anyone from G2 and say they're a really good player, but like Jankos actually has been really good as well. So I think actually a lot of the good EU teams are made by having a strong jungler. Selfmade as well. Like, Selfmade is the backbone of SK. If he doesn't do stuff, that doesn't do anything. And Maxlaw started off the early split with a game plan. He was like, okay, I'm going to camp bot every single fucking game. And then he just stopped doing it, and the team fell apart around him.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about like this team's result to me is that angle of like, because here's the problem with the premise, right? Is normally I would go back to first principles. I'd say, right, well, what was the premise that made me think this would be such a sick team, right? And obviously it is. You look at each of the players in isolation; they've all been part of good to very, very good teams in their region, if not worldwide. Well, the problem is that isn't incorrect. Like that part. That's why everyone thought it would be good. If you go back and look at it, not only does that make sense before the split, but I even made this point towards the end of the split. Sure, they had some bad games individually, but generally, I actually thought the interesting thing about their team was, outside of Maxlaw and maybe at times Hans Sama, I think most players weren't even close to the worst at their role. Like, I think somehow in isolation across the split, a lot of them had like an okay split. Like, I actually think, for example, for the first 2/3 of the split, Soz was pretty fucking good. You know, for most of the split, if you just only talk purely about like laning, everyone was pretty good. You know, it's like actually there was all these aspects that even within the train wreck was still pretty good. It's just that unfortunately, obviously, it never came together as like the whole unit. It never like became 5 players into one and had the like same identity. And so the funny thing was, I remember one of the things that really confused me when the team started to do badly was I was trying to figure out, right, which is it? Have they just got like no shot calling? Because from the outside, that's what it looked like. But that's what didn't make sense because there's so many experienced players here who in theory have been part of it. Then it's like, well, have they got too much shot calling? And it's like, I don't really know because actually, to be honest, like on paper, that's what you'd look at Origin and think they had. Like they have so many players that also, like you say, they've got Mithy, fucking Cold. They've got all these players that obviously you can shot call around. So I have to figure, right, this is the analogy I want to make was, one of the things I've learned to do when I look at Counter-Strike rosters to figure out if that's going to work, because again, you know, you're looking at players that in isolation you know, but you don't know how they'll fit together. The worst mistake you can make with a Counter-Strike lineup is where you make a team of really good players, but it's like 5 passive players, or there's like only one dude who can even vaguely be like an entry fragger or something, or like an aggressive player early, and it's like as a result, you know, all the duty goes to him and like the straight. So either you have no one, and therefore like you never even can get off the ground. It's like I feel like there was some of that component involved because I can't believe if you'd have paused it and got some of these guys are really smart. Sat Gorilla and Max Law and so on. Come on, they would be able to tell me on paper, you know, what we should probably do. But if all your tendencies go towards like not somehow syncing up, I could totally see how you could never pull the trigger on something, or you know, people maybe they just expect to have a sync with someone where it's going to make sense what's going to happen.
See, I agree with that. I think though a good like a sort of a counterpoint is Origin is the passive team to me in the league, right? You've got Cold, Nukeduck, Alfari, like Patrick. No one on that team is the guy you think is going to make the big play. That you haven't got a Caps there who's actually going to step up and like destroy. But they seem to understand how to play around that and how to like they out mind game their opponents. Whereas with Misfits, it always felt like maybe there was a little bit of a lack of trust between the players when they were like making calls and making like decisions. And one guy would say, "Oh, I think we should do this," and the other guy would be like, "Oh yeah, we could do that, but I think this is a better strategy right now." Or they wouldn't all align. Whereas Origin, although they're all passive, right, they all fucking align. And then when it comes down to the crunch, they're all there as a 5-man instead of being 2 people top, 2 people bot, and 1 person messing around in the jungle, right? So if Misfits could find, and some of it has to go to coaching staff, right? They have a good coaching staff, but obviously they haven't taught this. If Misfits can find that synergy, then I think in summer they could be one of our top teams, but they just don't seem to have that alignment as a team.
Because here's the thing, Loco. What I wanted to ask you along these lines is like, this is a topic that I've seen dismissed so easily in interviews where people talk about like, oh yeah, we're going to train like our jungler as a shot caller, or like, you know, this season we're going to try and like split the shot calling responsibilities, and they make it sound like shot calling's just like, I don't even know how you like doing the fucking that trick where you go, oh, look at my thumb there. It's like as if you just show someone, look, all I did is put my thumb, and then they go like that. Oh yeah, it works. Yeah, and then they I'm a shot caller now. It's like I would give the analogy that a shot caller is more like learning a different language. It's like, yeah, in theory anyone could do it, but how many people are going to stick with it? And, you know, if you've got one guy who's 10 years in on the language, you probably don't want the guy who's like 6 months in, you know, and still really raw. Because I want to ask about this aspect, Loco. When you have veteran players like that, and you have players who individually are good, people would think, surely the coaching staff can just figure this out. Come on, like, let's figure out who's going to decide at this point of the game, or who's going to tell us when to engage. Is it that easy? What do you think?
I mean, shot calling, to touch on it, is understanding how the game needs to be won with your team and the players and the champions that you guys are playing. So you need to have really deep understanding. That's one part, like knowledge. And the other part is being able to actually tell people and remind people and constantly be forward about it. Like, even if you know, hey, we need to be setting up for Dragon, you need to be able to explain to your team in reviews how you need to be setting up. And you need to also understand in the game itself, like how the execution of it looks like. Call it 1 minute before Dragon spawns. Make sure everyone has their recall set up. Make sure you guys are placing vision in the right places. Make sure you know if you want to finish Dragon, if you want to fight for Dragon. Like, there's a lot of things that go into it. It's not just knowledge, it's a lot of action too, and being able to be proactive. So to go into like Misfits shot calling, as Medic said, like Origin's the passive team, but they know overall as a team what they want to do. We want to scale to a certain point, and we want to play out the game in this manner. We want to get to this point in the game, and we want to do it in this manner. Misfits is scaling for nothing, where Origin is scaling to a certain point. Like, I mean, if you're scaling, you're waiting to hit certain item power spikes. Like, that's why you're scaling. So the question...
I mean, Misfits in that sense isn't scaling. They're just waiting, Loco. The two can look very similar, admittedly, but...
So the question I want to throw back at both Doran and Medic is, do you want to see Misfits without a roster change in the summer? Because for me, that's a no.
I would say this, right? The analogy I would give for this team, because I've tried to think of one that does fit what I said earlier, which is that, no, I don't think, as far as I know, anyone is revisiting the premise like, oh, some of those were just bad players all along, and, we just didn't know until, like 6 seasons in or something, No, obviously, they were all really good. So the analogy I would give, actually, even though it's going to be like an extreme one, because this team was never even as bad domestically as Misfits has been, would be the KT Roaster team of 2 years ago. Because not only was that like a super team, but on paper, even when you saw it fail, every split I would come back and I'd go, nah, still should be the best, right? This is the split. And then I kept thinking, especially because that team also had every element, had people who shot called, had some of the best shot callers, in fact. It even had that aspect, which I think is what makes the Misfits one so dire, which is, this is actually one thing I think is a problem in League. One of the reasons I've always felt that, like, you can't typically have an all-star team, and you can't have like triple lane threats, for example, and you can't have like all the players be shot callers, is it does actually seem as though you like end up neutralizing each other. Like, one of the things is, if you remember, for example, that team was one where before that, obviously Smeb was on the Rocks Tigers, right? And if you're on the Rocks Tigers, the way their bot lane played, there's never even any question that the priority is going to be on the bot lane. It's like, no, you're Smeb. It's obviously going to go through you. You got Kuro in the middle. It's like everyone knows which way their bread's buttered, as the old idiom goes. Like, it's actually totally obvious. And so even though that probably cost you lots of games where it was predictable, it also means your own team it's predictable for. We all know at all points in time what the hierarchy is, who should be ahead here, what we should do here, what we should do in response. It's like if you actually have like all the tools and all the options, that can lead to like inaction. You don't know it isn't obvious what to do. And even worse, I've no doubt that makes it harder to fix problems, because then it's like, well, what is the problem in this scenario? Like in theory, all should be working. So, for example, in that KT Rolster team, famously, I actually would agree with what Loco's assessment used to be of that team, which is like they basically were a team where you had Smeb had been played around his whole career, you had Deft had been played around for the last like 3 or 4 years, and then both of them, it probably took them forever to ever have a real decision of like, right, one of us basically can't just be the person who expects all the resources all the time. And so in Misfits, I mean, to be fair, they only had all the best of ones. I will say that as well. It's a very unforgiving format. Like next thing you know, you've lost to that guy. Now you have to beat him next time just to get a 1-1 and not have the tiebreaker. So like, it's not like you have that much time to figure it all out. But that's the most worrying thing. Is if you look at them throughout the split, I don't know if you can say they ever got close to figuring it out. Like, you think of some of the other teams, Orion did start off kind of a bit wonky, but you could see like week on week improvement with that team. Misfits, it's like, I've no doubt they tried stuff in practice, but I never saw it in the actual game. Like, nothing ever translated to the stage.
I definitely agree with that. I think Misfits, like, they started off the strongest. They were beating teams in like 20, 25 minutes or so, and like playing through their bottom lane. In terms of whether I'd want to change something for next split, I think the idea for me is like you can have all the ingredients to make a really good cake, but if you do it in the wrong order, it's not going to work, right? Mm-hmm. But I'd still want all of the right ingredients. And I think that team has everything it needs, right? You've got Soaz, who can play passively in the top lane. You have Forbidden, who is a relatively passive but good mid laner. And then you have a bot lane you can play through, right? They just need to actually go through what they did at the start of the split and work out a play style that works for them around that, instead of trying to play through all their other lanes. Like, if Max saw constant gank spot, that team will win more than 50% of the games in the LEC. Because our bot lanes are good, but they're not amazing, right? Mm-hmm. So I just don't understand what it was coaching-wise that led them away from that strategy, or what it was like synergy-wise that led them away from the strategy. And if they do it in summer, I see them being a top half of the table.
Yeah, that's the thing. Because the thing is, Loco, like, the reason I would do a roster move, I mean, I've mentioned this in the past, is just because generally I actually think there's a limit to what coaching can do. Like, if you have like 6 months with a team and you still can't get them on board, the reason why doing a roster move could instantly make your team better is because a new guy, maybe that guy gets something or maybe just doesn't have a problem that the other person did. It's like the easy solution, But in this particular scenario, I kind of with Medic on that one, because the thing that still doesn't make sense when you look at this team is what's crazy about this one, the more I look at the lineup and think of past Misfits lineups, because that's the thing, right? Normally, Medic, I get mad triggered when people refer to like old lineups that are barely the same. I have like 2 players in this case. But this actually is applicable because it's like, what's bizarre is the players they got are almost just upgrades of some of the last players they had. So with the exception that Ignal was pretty different support to Gorilla, all the rest are actually pretty good upgrades. Like if you told me, right, we can only replace Sencox, but we're going to replace him with Featherman, I'd be like, that's actually fucking perfect. Like Featherman, Power of Evil. Featherman's basically a better version of those guys. Like, that's great. Yeah, let's do that. Right. Can't have Alfari anymore. Oh, he's really good, actually. Like, he had a really great strength to just play on his own in the top. Got his SOAS. It's brilliant. You've done it again. Better version. Great. So it's like all the pieces should be there. And in fact, that's the reason why, even though I don't think he was terrible, that's the reason why I do get why some people have focused on, aside from Maxwell, maybe Hans Sam as the player you could replace. Because he is the one who so obviously naturally should have been the person who was going to carry the game, blah, blah, blah. He used to set the old Misfits up to do that. So he just never really got activated in that sense. That's the part that disturbs me about that one.
Well, my thoughts on it is I definitely do think they should make a roster change because I really want to see them shuffle it up in the jungle. I'm not sure what kind of max floor we're going to get next split. And also, one thing good about a roster change is it's a fresh start for everyone involved. And I'm not sure mentally if it's great for Misfits to go into another season with the same roster they had. If they run into problems, it's going to be much harder to solve than it was in spring. Because we already fucked up in spring and we were sticking with the same roster. In a third, it's kind of fucked up, but when you replace someone, right, you get to scapegoat a lot of your problems onto that person, and you can start anew, and you can have a fresh start, and everyone is like gonna give each other chances again. But if you go in with the exact 5, then it's a lot more murky, and you can't. It's a lot more murky, and it's a lot harder to be flexible and try to solve problems together versus what was happening in spring. So I want to see them make a roster change. I'm not sure who's available in Masters League. That's a great jungler, but Misfits is only using one import slot, so they could even get a import jungler if they wanted to. And the spicy thing would be if they got someone like Meteos or a Dardoch, like maybe an NA import. I'm not sure about the Masters junglers. Like I don't watch that league. I don't even know what all the teams are involved. So maybe there is a really good up and coming jungler from Europe. But if they can't get a good up and coming jungler from Europe, maybe go for Dardoch or Meteos.
Dardoch would be so spicy. I was thinking, I don't want to get caught in the hypotheticals, but someone like a Dardoch would be really interesting, especially on that team. My only concern is there's some emotional players on it, right? And Dardoch has a track record of on the closer side to the line than perhaps others.
Sure.
Medic, your mic is cutting out a bit. Either move it closer
sorry, mate.
Change the setting on Discord.
Okay.
All right. Right. Before we go, because we'll just talk about the 6 playoff teams after this. Right. Let's also address then, because this is the problem, Medic. Like on paper, I'll tell everyone now what was supposed to happen. Right. The teams that probably on paper weren't supposed to make it was like SK Gaming, obviously. I mean, it just goes without saying if you look at the lineup. And then I personally would have said, if you looked at the other ones, I think most people would have said Splice is probably the team that gets squeezed out, right? If you just look overall. So we have to address Schalke as well, because the problem with Schalke is they started so great. Except the difference was, unlike the Misfits one, where it's kind of like they started great when no one was good, almost except G2. Like Schalke actually also looked like they played well early on. But I have to say, this is a team where, as much as it might sound like a lazy narrative, I do feel like this team just got completely figured out. It's like that's the bad thing about a split, It's like it's not like a weekend tournament. You can't just get away with doing the same stuff all the time. Like, people will fit. Remember, there's a whole coaching staff's just studying you, breaking down film, what you're doing, your champions, how do you play, and all they're looking for is those 1 or 2 little gaps. And unfortunately, as soon as you open the wound like that, it's just over.
I think Memento really lost a lot of his sting early on as well. Like him and Ignar in the early portion of the split were just this duo, unstoppable duo. You know, you'd see them roaming level 4, level 5, level 6, getting into the enemy jungle, really doing stuff. And I think the play that encapsulates Memento's second half of the split is when he tries to counter gank mid and then stopwatches as he comes around the corner, and it's just like, well, now you just die, right? Like you just lose the game. One other thing that about Schalke is they brought Dylan Falco in, of course, and we were all praising him. We were like, oh, he's really good. I think he brought a lot of Fnatic's knowledge to Schalke, taught them how to play that meta, and then wasn't able to adapt to a new meta when it started to come around. And although you had the superstar AD carry, they never really enabled Upset to be successful. I mean, even getting a pentakill and then losing the game, like that is like quintessential Schalke, right? You could get Upset as far ahead as possible, but no one else on that team was really stepping up.
I'll say they were weak in mid and jungle are just roles you cannot cover up in some way. If your support is weak, if your top is weak, if your AD carry is weak, there's a lot of ways you can kind of band-aid solution that. We'll play around mid and jungle as much as possible, and we'll just let bottom lane scale. We'll pick a tank for top. There's a lot of ways you can get around having a weak side lane, but you cannot get around having a weak mid and jungle, and I think that was the core of Schalke's problem. Like, their jungle and mid were weak, and they would get leads sometimes, they would get priority sometime, and they would have no idea what to do with it. It was so surprising to watch, because what was it? I think that it was their tiebreaker game versus SK, where Memento actually got 3 kills on Jarvan, and I was like, holy shit, Selfmade's not playing that hot, and like SK's really relying on Selfmade. Maybe this is the one game that Schalke wins, and then they get to go to playoffs, and they did nothing with their lead. They had no idea how to use their priority, and yeah, I mean, if your mid and jungle isn't good, your team isn't going to be good. There's no way to get around it.
Sure. That is the roughest thing as well. This is another team that hasn't made the playoffs. But if I'm Odo Amne or I'm Upset, I'm like, listen, I don't want to throw blame, but I sort of did my fucking job. Come on, I was really good most of the split. Like, you know, this goes on my record as well. What are you doing, Memento? What the fuck is this? Like, that's why actually those two teams, Schalke and Misfits, on the one hand, you should fail if you've got better players and you can't get it over the line, as it were. But that's why it does kind of suck, because people will think we're making an excuse or something. But I actually do think some of these players in these teams actually played in isolation well. It's just that, like, if I actually look at the overall team aspect, it's totally deserved to not make the playoffs. Like, the teams that made it over them absolutely earned it if you look at the way they played. Like, you know, actually what's funny is, I mean, we'll get to them in a minute, but if you contrast some of these teams and the problems they had, where they supposedly had a whole bunch of good players and it didn't work, teams like a lot of the teams above them, SK, Vitality, Splice, these teams had like the obvious restrictions from which, again, at least they even knew, well, this is the way we're going to have to play to win. Oh, that is the way we can play to win. Whereas that's the thing, when Misfits and Schalke got to the point where what they were doing early didn't work, that was just it. That was just the end. And sadly, they just kept trying to find some variation to get back into what they were doing earlier. Because that's the thing, I can't entirely... This is why it's so tough with that like jungle mid synergy, is because I don't want to like hard flame one of the two, because it does look like if you add it up, collectively they were both bad.
Yeah.
But the problem is, like, for example, like Abadage looked fine for most of the early part of this, but he didn't really look like he was like bad. Memento obviously was getting all those leads, so it looked like, yeah, there's something there, but it never went past that. And obviously, then when you didn't even have that at all, at the end, it looked like put it this way, if they'd have had the whole split like they did at the end, this would be the most obvious team to flame ever. It'd be like, get mid and jungle out, like, in fact, fucking go to SK, give them a blank check, ask whatever they want for them, and, you know, something like that. That would be such an obvious fix. Whereas that's the thing, if you look at this lineup, this is a tough one to fix, actually, because, like, as you're saying, Loco, well, actually, Medic referenced it, but obviously Dylan's whole specialty was supposed to be as a jungler.
So,
you know, you would think fixing that aspect would be, like, the easiest aspect for him.
What Dylan is so fucking incredibly good at is early game jungle planning. I think Dylan and Rainover are the two people that I personally know of that plans out early game jungle pathing very, very specifically, and is very good at teaching it and is very good at executing it. That's why, I mean, kind of reminds me of Rainover, like, where they would get really good jungle pathing in the first or the second rotation of it, and then after that, Rainover would be really lost. And sometimes I see that with Memento, and I see that with a lot of Dylan junglers. They're really, really good at first round and like the second round of pathing, because they have it planned out and they talk about like the different permutations of it. But beyond that, then it's not just prep. After that, it's not prep, it's adaptation, it's execution on the things, you know. It's like, it's not just, you can't memorize everything after second pathing. Then that's where they run into the problems.
Yeah, so the problem is, if a coach or some other figure in the team could just do one timeout in a game, I'm not even saying they give like loads of timeouts like American football team, just give me one timeout. The problem is there are so many like win condition issues that teams run into, obviously macro aspects, like you would only need that one timeout, and the problem is you would have almost no teams that would show the kind of bad macro that you see as actually quite commonplace now. even in some, by the way, I'll tell you, I watch LPL games. Even some of the best LPL teams sometimes make really bizarre macro decisions that you think, like, there's no way the coach told them that. Like, you know for sure, even when they win this game, he's going to be pouring over this VOD and telling, what the fuck are you doing here? Like, what's that? Because there's so many times where it's like, think about some of the LCS games you see where it's like, but why did you go for that Baron? You know, you had the, you know, you had priority, you had like lane advantage, like you even had the better comp team. In fact, like, why are you going for that? And the point is, in that moment, the players collectively haven't really sat around and thought. Like, for example, I'd guess half those times is where one player does like the solo queue move of like, you know, you've got a bunch of kills, you've got the dragon, and he just goes like, can we do Baron? And then the problem is the other guy hears, can we do Baron, with the inflection of like, let's do Baron. And he doesn't know, he thinks he's just agreeing with that guy, whereas actually the first guy was even sort of saying like, I don't really know if we should. And then all of a sudden two people are saying it, and then the third one goes, yeah, go now. And it's like, and then all of a sudden you've got into a scenario that, and again, if you could all sit down and just rationally look at a blackboard, no one would pick this move, but somehow you're there. It's like, this really should be an episode that like LS or he would be this perfect sort of person that would just be like the classic like overused trope now from TV, where it's like all of a sudden it's like it just appears in a Baron pit and it goes, you're probably wondering how I got here, and it's so as someone's just hitting the Baron, fuck, get it. It's like, you know, it just makes you look like fools, even though nice list, you're probably all really smart. So this is one aspect I actually always thought that Korean teams, well, that's one of the reasons I personally always thought they were way ahead of Westerners. It wasn't that they just had all the best players. That never made any sense by the fact that China existed for a start off. But one area they were always way ahead is that's the reason why that meme exists, Loco, of like the Korean style, which let's face it, is just SK Telecom. But it was a very successful style. And then I guess at the end, Gen G sort of did that a bit as well. Mm-hmm. The reason why that style works like a motherfucker is because you actually don't try to have like 50 different things you can do in the game and a million like flowchart paths. You try to basically coach like these strong fundamentals, and like what, and those teams basically by the end would just like counterpunch the team. So it's like, right, we just set it up perfectly. So when they attack us, that almost like tells us what we do next. Like we don't even have to necessarily have the genius best shot. Like they didn't have Matter, the shot caller at the time, or some super genius high that's going to macro on the home. They just did simple responses, and in that sense, it can't go wrong as much. Whereas if you see all these teams that try to be really proactive, that's fucking tough if you haven't got good shot calling.
But that's what makes it fun, right? Like I agree that having perfect macro is great and all, and like we see Korean games that go 0-0 25 minutes in, one team has a 10,000 gold lead because the other team said, well, we can't take the 51% play, we can only wait until it's a 90% play. But like, it's so much more fun to have a bit of a clown fiesta, have two teams just being like, I'll just take the play against you, like just go for the fight. That's why LPL was like it was the team fight region, because you knew like they thought they could just beat their opponents. They're like, even if it's like even on items, even on gold, we're just going to take the fight to them because we think we're better players. And that's what I find joyous in League of Legends. Like the Fnatic G2 game last week, where they were just like, fuck it, go for the 5th Baron of the game, someone gets it, we're going to backdoor, you can go for our Nexus, we'll see who wins, right? But if you make the perfect call there, G2 should have lost the game like 25 minutes beforehand because Fnatic had a 10,000 gold lead. But yeah, I know, like I just like a little bit of a fiesta and a little bit of fun because it makes my job easier as well.
Sure.
So if we're going to talk about fiesta teams, I really want to talk about Vitality.
Oh, NA? Oh. No, sorry, Vitality.
There we go. Right.
Yeah. That's my one. That's my one for
strike one. All right, he came with a fastball there. You got to switch it up next time on that one.
So for
Vitality. Yeah.
For Vitality, and one person when it comes to Vitality, I really want to talk about is Cabochard. Cabochard has been having fucking insane split, and he's been so quiet about it. I think a lot of times Vitality plays to bottom way more so than they play to Cabochard. So it's very rare where the player you don't play towards is your best player, but I think Cabochard is their best player by far. When you think Vitality, you're going to think Attila and you're going to think Tsuzuke, because those are the lanes that get more resource and more jungler ganks. But man, Cabo, no jungle gank or very little jungle gank, always ahead, always pushing forward. He just puts out maximum pressure without getting any of the resource. It's such a good way to play top lane, and it's such a solid top lane to have. So man, Cabochard, like I know Youngbuck mentioned that he voted him to be his #1 for MVP. Yeah. I would give it to Caps, honestly, but Cabochard definitely is up there.
What I liked about that, by the way, just as a quick aside, is that when Young Bucks said that, you have to understand, right? If you're a fan out there, I can tell you what the mentality of a coach when he says that is. He was actually trying to be magnanimous, because what they basically were saying was like, look, obviously Caps has fucked us over, but you know what? We're still going to give him number 2 in the MVP. You know, we're trying to be as fair as we can. The problem is, it's like, I think most of the people looked at that and they were like, that kind of looks like you went out of your way to find out how you could not make him the MVP. It's like, what's mad is in a weird way, it still came off as like a tiny bit petty. Not really petty. Really petty would be like the seasons when some arseholes in the NALCS put like Doublelift wasn't even an MVP candidate when like 13 people thought he was the MVP. So it wasn't that petty, but it did kind of have like a little bit of like, is that nice though? Isn't he kind of the best player?
It depends how you rate MVP, right? Like, so I lead the project here, and it's such a subjective rating. I think if you take Cabo out of Vitality, they are nowhere near the same team they were at the moment, right? Like, whereas if you take Caps out of G2 and replace him with Nukeduck or replace him with Forbiven, right? G2 probably still wins a shit ton of games. Whereas Vitality, I don't think, maybe they're not even top half the table without Capo.
There's a problem with that logic, right? Because that's actually currently very, very popular logic in American sports, actually. Like, they always like to do that. That's the reason, for example, we've discussed this many times in the past, like, coach of the split, and it always goes to the guy who just took the worst team that's now good to the top. Yep. It's never, like, usually the guy where it's like, well, I'm winning my 3rd split, even though, again, you could obviously make a great case that the guy who wins every split's the coach of the split. But the problem with that, and the problem with that logic for me personally, the reason I don't go along with that reasoning, is it would actually mean that almost all the greatest players in history would have barely any MVPs ever. Like, for example, how would Faker ever have an MVP? He'd never have one, right? Because most of those teams had very good players as well as Faker. So I know kind of what people mean by that, but like, I think it can't be one or the other. It has to be some marriage of the two.
Oh yeah, like, I totally agree with that. Right, if Caps destroys every game, even if we could replace him with like a shitty mid laner, right, he's still MVP. Like last year, Fnatic were the best team in the league, but Caps was still the best player in the league, right? And I don't think I'd put it past anyone putting Caps as the top player for this split because he's destroyed. But to me, the ability to carry a team that shouldn't be as high as it is and make them that much better, it just outweighs it slightly.
Put it this way, I actually do think that MVP discussion is a legitimate one. Like, actually, I already would have said Cabochard was a legit. In fact, I think once you get past Cabochard and Caps, like, it doesn't really matter who you put third. I notice a lot of people had trouble with that, but I would just say this: if Caps had done an identical performance to what he did in G2 on Fnatic, I don't believe Fnatic players themselves would think he was second in the MVP voting. You know what I mean? Like, I think they would all of a sudden, because again, it's a legitimate point, they'd all of a sudden be back on my side on that one. They'd be like, I think it's probably Caps is the MVP. That guy, you know, we so sorely miss. I mean, don't miss. I mean, it's fine. I mean,
never
even his Caps.
The new Caps, right?
Yeah, listen, I mean, whatever.
Going back a little bit on Vitality, one thing that you guys said regarding
we haven't even started talking about Vitality yet. So.
Yeah, one thing you guys said regarding Schalke, where they got figured out as the split went on, I think that's kind of happening to Vitality, and their style is very, very aggressive and very, very fight heavy, and I think there's 2 ways a lot of teams can tackle it. So I think G2 and SK can tackle it like man for man. Like, if you're going to be aggressive, we'll be aggressive with you and we'll be better than you at it. And I think that's how SK dismantled Vitality in their matchup in last week, where they took the fights, and Vitality does not know how to recover. When they start losing fights, it's not let's wait for this point and then fight again. It's we lost a fight, well, we're going to double up and fight again and hopefully we win this one. So I think G2 and SK can really handle them in that sense, where they match their aggression with aggression and come out ahead. And a lot of the other teams, they scale really, really nicely. Origin, Splice, I think these teams can kind of neutralize Vitality's early game and tackle them later. So yeah, I think there's 2 ways that you can handle Vitality, and all the other playoff teams in LEC are very well equipped to handle Vitality.
Anyway, Benedict, what were you going to say about them?
Oh, about Vitality? Yeah, I think I agree with Loco. Actually, I'm pretty worried for them. I think they might be the worst team in playoffs. When you look at their track record over the last few weeks, they've only beaten they beat Rogue. They lost to Excel last week. They beat Misfits when they had Seiken in as a sub, right? And what they used to do was have as Loco's saying, like really strong early game, get a Tiller ahead, look for Mowgli to like setups and things around Jizuke in the mid lane as well, and then they go to this like 1-4, maybe 1-3-1 with like Cabochard roaming to the rest of the team. but everyone else in the playoffs is actually really good at dealing with that start, right? G2 will match you, as you say. SK can go for team fights just a little bit earlier if they want, with Crownshot actually stepping up, and then everyone else will just wait you out and then out team fight you in the late game. So I would not be surprised at all if we see Vitality probably get 3-0'd by Fnatic and just get kicked out straight away.
What do you think?
It's funny that even though I agree those last games obviously look terrible, especially because of the competition they were losing against, one of the games that I had real warning signs after was that game that they lost to G2, because that was like a game where it's like, I hate using the term throw, because then people just spam it everywhere on every fucking game that anyone loses, as though you have to play perfectly, otherwise it's a throw. But that was about as close to a throw as I've seen in a long time. Like, they had edges so many times in that game. It's like overwhelming edges at times. And even though, yes, of all the teams that could get back in if you give them a tiny gap, or you'd expect G2 to be amazing at team fighting if they get a chance at any point in a game, but that really should have been a one game. So when you look forwards to the playoffs, that's the thing. You look at a lot of the teams in the playoffs here. I mean, especially people like Splice, Orion. These teams especially, like, I think they would absolutely murder Vitality in a best of 5. Like, they have the stylistic matchup to do it, because Vitality would have to do what they did in the split, but like almost twice as good, because they have to get all the leads. They have to get priority on Ajizuki. They have to make sure that those champions can split push, otherwise they're ineffective in a team fight comp. Like, all the things that everyone was trying to say all split along. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm sure the coaching staff for every team playing them was saying, like, listen, we've identified what they do strong. Here are the 3 things they do every game. But the difference was Vitality. It's like, my joke was, if you're going to cheese, Vitality's like got a whole cookbook of cheese. And they're not like, here's the one thing we've got. They're like, I can go to this fight. Right, we've got this one where Cabashard gets a carry. Like, they had a million variations, but even so, that can't be the whole game. There's got to be more than that eventually, guys, especially in a playoff series.
Also, one thing that was super interesting is Fnatic snap pick Vitality.
Yeah.
So from watching the broadcast, it seemed like they could have waited until Schalke and SK started finishing. They did not wait. They were like, we're going to choose Vitality over both Schalke and SK Gaming, which is, in a sense, kind of disrespectful, like, because you're just
the Splice and SK, you mean?
No.
Oh, you mean because the winner, right? I see what you mean, yes.
It's really disrespectful to be like, yeah, we don't even care who's the 6th seed. We think both of them are better matchups for us than Vitality is, so we're just going to snap pick Vitality.
There was the part where, like, Fnatic had lost to SK both times as well. That was probably in their mind as well.
Before they even know it was SK that they'd be playing, right?
Sure.
Like, anyone who would say I'd pick Vitality over Schalke, I think, is memeing a little bit, because Schalke looked absolutely diabolically, like, just awful. But yeah, for Fnatic to do that, it's like Reckless said it was mind games, Youngbuck said it was mind games. If it's mind games and it works, it's great. If it's mind games and, you know, Vitality come back swinging, then you kind of shot yourself in the foot a little bit, Fnatic.
Well, the joke with that is, like, even if it doesn't work, it is mind games. It's just you didn't know it ended up being a mind game on yourself. Yeah. That can also be what can happen as well, right?
Congratulations, you played yourself.
Here's a tip about mind games. If you're playing mind games, you don't fucking tell the other side, hey, I'm mind gaming you right now. Like, you just fucking...
Maybe that's the mind game, though.
They're playing 4D
exactly.
League.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like auto chess.
I don't.
You gotta layer the mind games in there, you know.
Let's move on to a different team. The other team we were talking about, SK. I actually am super surprised that SK got this far. I thought Selfmade was good, but I thought they dug themselves into too big of a hole, and they didn't have enough standout players on their team. But everyone started stepping up. It wasn't just initially. It looked like it was Selfmade period. Crownshot really found his kind of stride by picking Jinx, and then the whole team kind of leaning into team fight. Like, Selfmade get us ahead, and then we'll lean into team fight, and then Worley with his Poppy pick, good tank play, just also stepped up. Dreams also stepped up. I thought they were just a 2-man team, but they ended up being a very, very solid team fighting team later down the line. Kind of what Schalke probably wanted to turn into. Like, I think SK Gaming is what Schalke really wanted to be.
What do you think, Medic?
I definitely agree with you. I think the G2 game in week 7 was the big turning point for them when they came back from about 10k deficit, and Crownshot on Jinx actually really started to step up in teamfights. I want to bring attention to Dreams as well. I think he's actually probably one of the top 3 supports in our league. He's super good at engaging. He knows how to space in lane as well. Like, his positioning in lane and his ability to keep Crownshot safe in the early game is actually really strong. and he's been around in the scene for such a long time that people kind of undervalue him as one of the top supports, right? People always talk about Mickey and Hylissang and stuff, but Dreams has actually really started to shine for me. And being a support main, right, it tends to be where I put my focus. So for him to play as well as he does in team fights and really help control zones in team fights actually sets Crownshot up for success later on.
Yeah, the thing I have with this team is, like, it ties into what I said about Schalke and Misfits. It's like, I give props to SK because, like, for me, they're an example of, like, someone where, you know, they should have been like a C or a D grade student, and somehow they, like, didn't ace the test, but they passed. They got a passing grade. It's like, oh, well done. You did okay. But the point is, like, they could have done all the same stuff, and if Misfits just had their shit together, it wouldn't matter. They'd be out of the playoffs. They wouldn't be in the playoffs. They probably might not even have had a chance to be in the playoffs, depending on how it had gone throughout the split. So, like, I actually do think overall, I know in terms of form, they're definitely not, because the last couple of weeks were good, but I do think, like, in terms of the pieces, I think they're the worst team in the playoffs. And I also think if you look at them, like, I don't think there's any teams here they could beat in a best of 5. So I don't expect personally anything to happen. But that's because this is the success already. Like, this is a team that shouldn't have been at this point in time. Like, look at what a mess the roster looks like when you first see it. Like, you know, it doesn't look like a team that you think have big chances to do something. And then actually they did manage to forge a coherent playing style. So props to them for that. But I just don't really know how much further you can go at this point in time. Like, I think they clearly do. Outside of Selfmade, who has been obviously like the revelation of the split in many ways, the rest of the players, like, I wouldn't have any of these other players on my all-pro or something like that. I don't think they have star players outside of him, basically. So it's a fucking tough go if your best player is your jungler. That's a tough go in a best-of-5 series. Why, I have to carry this whole fucking series?
So I think I agree, but I also think you're like... They play Splice in the first round, right, in next week, and I could see them taking a game or two off Splice, right? Like, I'm not sure they win the entire series because Splice probably just play for late game and scale it out. But as you say, like, if Selfmade gets a few early kills and you get Pyrian rolling in mid, you get Crownshot in a good position on a scaling AD carry, like, you can play for teamfights versus Splice, and although they're a good teamfighting team, if you an item and a half ahead of them, you're just going to roll over them, right? So I agree that, like, they shouldn't be expecting to make it to round 2. They shouldn't be expecting to make it to Rotterdam, but to say that they are not going to take any games off Splice, I think is a little bit disingenuous.
I do think they're a very momentum-based team and emotional team. Like, just players are young. Like, the way they celebrate, and, like, I can see, like, they're very happy whenever they do get the win. So if they
I've just realised we've already passed the section where we were talking about Schalke, and there's actually an amazing pun that you could have made, which is that the problem is, right, they ended up playing in Schalke also too much around momentum, right? Which is like, Memento was like, what should I do? But what they needed was Memento. So he was like, oh, that's what we should do. That would have been straight out. Editor, this is where if you want to fuck around, mate, you want to call yourself an editor, you have to find a way to make that entire joke actually be in the earlier part of the show. We'll do like canned laughter at the end. Put that in, you know. Nah, don't, obviously, that'd be mad. But it's the problem with that is, even if as a joke it would be funny, if I knew I had that power, I'd probably start just doing that all the time, like at the end. Now we're going to just film the last 3 jokes again, guys, and then put those earlier in. And I want more laughter this time, Loco. Like, standing ovation for this one. Come on. So anyway, whatever. You see the joke I was going for there.
Thanks for cutting off my point.
It was good,
and then to get back into it, I think, SK is a very big momentum-based team. So if they start taking games off of Splice, I can see them winning. If they take game 1, I think game 1's going to be really, really important for SK. So I am going to lean towards Splice for their matchup also, but I don't think it's out of question that SK wins. I think they definitely have a puncher's chance, and they're not a team that's going to just roll over and die. Like, if they lose, they're going to try what they need to do and lose. They're not going to be like, they're not going to take it slow and just lose very, very slowly. And I think that's one of the worst ways you can play versus Splice.
Right, wait a minute. Because here's the thing. First of all, the problem with how we set this show up, Loco, is at the moment we were going team by team, but then we're already going into the matchups. So it's like, we're going to have to double back on the Fnatic versus Vitality one in a minute. But we'll do the matchups as we talk about the teams. I guess we should pair the two together. My problem with this is, like, people love to do this when they see a playoff matchup, right? Which is that they try to figure out a way. It's a good analysis. Like, what for people who don't know, even though the punchline of an analysis desk segment about a playoff series is who will win and why, and you're supposed to, pin your colours to the mast and say, I'm picking that team, because it's a good way to make yourself not just go between all the choices you could have and leave it out there. But as an analyst, before you make your choice, that is what you do. You try and think of, like, what's the win condition for this team? What's the win condition for me? What's the player that could overperform here and make me win? What's the player that could fail on the favourite and make them lose? You think of all those factors, and then at the end, you do an equation, and at the end you get sort of like, right, this team wins probably, or maybe, or a lot. But the problem I have is it's really easy when you do that to also hedge towards like, every team has a chance. Could win. So the problem I have on this one is, right, I think if I put a gun to either your heads, neither of you's picking fucking SK Gaming. No way. And not least because, first of all, like I've been saying the whole split long, if Splice ever made the playoffs, they were going to be a problem for some teams because that style is fucking money in the playoffs. Like, I love to have a team that scales up and wins in the late game with team fights. That is literally like 90% of winning League of Legends, even in the region famed for 1-3-1, because you have to set up the 1-3-1 correctly. You have to have people that are ahead. You have the right champions. Like, there's so many things can go wrong with that. Whereas, like, as you've seen, if you coach them well, they have been coached pretty well, I think, on this team, actually. They are very good when they get to that point. Now, I will say this. I'll bring in here some criticism I saw from someone in the Splice organization. The guy who obviously used to just be straight up the coach, which is Peter Dunn. Mm-hmm. Now, he got mad on Twitter, right? Because he felt like, as usual, right, whenever you make a narrative, the problem is the narrative initially comes from people who know about the game, and then it gets stripped out by the people who don't know as much, and they will repeat it sometimes in an inappropriate place, where it's like the person who knows the game, especially if he's in their team and he knows intimately all the aspects of how the team functions, he's going to be like, but that isn't actually, like, the narrative's too forced there, or, you've gone too far with it. So what he got upset by was that people did say, like, oh, this is a team where, what they do is they sort of like outscale you, like they get into the team fights late and then they just win, which definitely, by the way, there's absolutely not just a grain of truth. That was fucking half of a beach. Mm-hmm. It's just the problem was, and this is where it gets kind of funny, is Peter got annoyed because his point was, if you look throughout the split, there were actually also times, I would even agree towards the end, where like actually their early games started to get pretty good. Mm-hmm. But here's the problem with that, Peter, that you didn't think about, my friend, is I agree with you. Think about this. You had good early sometimes, and you were really good winning all those games late. What the fuck were you doing in the middle, you idiot? You absolute buffoon. What are you... What, if my team has really good early game, I should never be in all those late game team fights. Shut up, what are you talking about? You basically just admitted you were trying to big up your own team without admitting, like... the mid shit, isn't it? Like, you've actually sort of set yourself up for that. You haven't thought that one through. So what I would say on that one is, I agree. As a result, SK is a nice stylistic matchup. Like, you see how proactive they are, how good their jungler is. That'll give you some good chances early on against Splice. But I also don't think it's like as extreme as, like, if this isn't like earlier in the split when Vitality and Splice were first playing it. It was like, well, this is pretty obvious. Like, Splice should be in a lot of trouble there because this is the team that's going to give them all the problems early game. Like, I think SK, almost everything has to go right for them to win this series. It's going to be so difficult. And I also think as well, by the end of the split, I think the thing I like about the Splice team is, I haven't changed my mind on that many of the players, although the one I did change my mind on was Cersei, because I actually thought he was fucking dire last year, man. I wasn't a fan of his, especially when I saw, like, mate, when I saw he was on the team with Odoamne, I thought, like, come on, they're both from the same fucking country, and normally you're never going to get that in, like, LEC of that level. So I was like, surely they're going to have some special synergy. And it's like, I don't even know that they did. That was bizarre. It never got going, that Splice. So the thing about this one is, this team actually has an underrated roster. Because again, I wouldn't personally say this team has any player who should really be an MVP candidate. I personally don't think so. But none of the players are bad. Especially now that I've seen Cersei be actually one of the best players on the team. Like, this is one of those teams where all the players are, like, deceptively good. Mm-hmm. And in fact, actually, another guy where, because he didn't do super well, like, he never really got the pop-off moments to look super sick. But I think actually Humanoid for a rookie, what a great performance this split. This guy did really well.
I think I definitely agree with that. Yeah, the only I think Humanoid would be the only point where I could say maybe you could target him, but I don't think SK are ever able to do that. Right, Pyrian hasn't shown us enough like pure 1v1 mid lane destruction moments. Mm-hmm. I think you also have to give some credit to Kobe. Like he this split has had the best split of his career in my opinion. He's the guy that's always been on Splice, and like in terms of AD carry rankings, yeah, he's not an MVP, but he's probably top of my AD carries. Like him, then Upset, then Reckless is what I'd be looking at.
It actually was. When you say that, though, that's the depressing thing, isn't it? Like, considering some of the other roles we have at the moment, Medic, like top lane's fucking banging in Europe right now. Jungler's pretty good. Mid lane always will be. Like, listen, Americans, do whatever the fuck you want. Buy half the league. We'll still just replace them with players just as good. But I will say,
like 5 good mid laners coming up.
AD carry is actually mildly underwhelming as a role this split. And in fact, if you look, a lot of the ones that should be good didn't even do that well. Like, obviously, like I said, it's not even Upset's fault, but he wasn't. If he's one of the best players, which I'd agree, that kind of shows how dire the pool was overall.
I kind of want to push you guys on like the mid lane thing because like it's very.
Here we go.
Listen.
Wait a minute. Just so I can set the scene for everyone right now. The same motherfucker who tries to convince me unsuccessfully every week that Phoenix is a really good, is even a good or competent mid laner. The same. It doesn't matter how many losses going. Like, listen, Phoenix catches more L to the face than a little cunt who just won in Fortnite. Like, this is unreal, the way that this guy tries to gaslight me. But again, he's the same guy who, because he's so used to the fucking baseline level of the LCS, thinks Phoenix is a competent mid laner, is now going to start telling us Europeans about how the mid lane works. So go ahead, Loco. Let me just fucking set up a little seat here, get out the fucking s'mores and start roasting. Those are marshmallows in the UK. Here we go.
Okay, let's go.
There we go, right. Do tell Loco, the mid lane in Europe, why isn't it as good as everyone thinks?
Okay, so I think it's a very lazy narrative to be like Europe has good mid, because yes, Europe has had good mid, but let's dissect this split. For this split, there are 3 rookies coming in, and Nemesis, Humanoid, and
Get ready for the straw, man.
And Abadage.
Abadage.
Yeah, so whenever there's rookies coming in, overall level is going to be lower unless it's like exceptional rookies like Perks and Caps coming in. Humanoid, Abadage, and Nemesis have been okay. They've all been okay rookies, but okay rookies coming in doesn't raise the level. And another big thing is we lost Perks this year for EU for a mid lane. So the only 2 EU mid laners that I look at and I'm like, damn, these guys are fucking good, are Caps and Nukeduck. I think the third one I normally would have gave to
Is this real life?
Alright, let me finish.
Real life?
Third one I would have normally gave to Zizuke, but he's been inconsistent. So I think a lot of ways like EU mid pool has gotten muddied. Go ahead.
How's he been inconsistent? Think about the way they play in Vitality, right? They don't just pick, here's a really strong lane champion, win your lane. They don't do that explicitly. They don't just go, well, this will be a good teamfight champion. They don't do that. How many mid laners do you know that you could just give weird picks to all day long and go, right, we're just going to try and make it so that you can side lane 24/7, and that would work every fucking game? I don't think so somehow. That's by definition going to be inconsistent.
So I mean, we can chalk it up to Vitality style being weird, but really go back and think of like the mid lane pool. Like last year.
Also, wait a minute, you're downplaying Nukeduck.
No, I'm not downplaying. I'm not downplaying Nukeduck. I'm not downplaying.
Nukeduck might have won on like 11 champions or something, mate. The guy's unreal.
I did not downplay Nukeduck. I said EU has 2 absolute top tier mid laners.
Right. First of all, there's two strawman elements here. Oh, go on, Medic. If you go.
I just like think. When you say absolute top tier, like what is top tier to you? Like is Bjergsen top tier? Is Jensen top tier? Is PoE top tier? Is Froggen top tier? Like where is the line?
Come on, then. Yeah, come on.
When we compare it to NA, I will probably side with EU still being better, but it's just compared to last year where we had.
Sure, you get.
Do you know my favorite part, by the way, Medic?
The league isn't going to be as good.
The best part of all of this.
The second best team in your league took one of our fucking.
Do you want to know something amazing, by the way? Is if I asked Loco right now to name the top 5 mid laners in LCS, they're all fucking European.
Exactly. It's like, oh, EU mid pool just not as good anymore because NA is taking them all. Like, if you get 3 rookies, it's not going to be as strong a pool because they don't have as much experience. But
for sure.
Give me 6 months and we'll fucking smash NA at any fucking mid lane.
I agree with you on all those points. I agree with you on all those points, but go back and listen to what I said. I think this split. EU mid has been weaker. Yeah, it's been weakest it's ever been. It's one of the weakest.
That's different then. That's the mistake you made, Loco. You made it sound as though it wasn't a strong pool.
If you just
listen. If you just mean relative to past years, it's not as strong. I would agree with you on that one.
Yeah, we can all agree on that.
It sounded like you were building up to explain that, like only caps and fucking.
with the entrance of rookies and Perks not playing mid anymore and losing Niski, like EU mid lane hasn't been as insane as it used to be. And the other role that I would want to push instead of that is top lane. Like EU top has actually been fucking insane this split comparatively. Like we always talk about, oh, EU mid, EU mid, EU mid. I think for this split, it's been EU top. Cabochard, Bizitachi, Wonder.
Admit, go the other way. I think if you look at the top lane in Europe right now, right, I actually personally don't think Werlib's that good. Like he just always gets like 1 or 2 champions he can play, and fair enough, he managed to get like integrated into the team by the end, but I still don't think he's a very good player. If you look elsewhere, there are basically no bad top laners. Like, I know everyone loved when he was in Rogue to say that Prophet was shit. Mate, Prophet has himself fucking carried a lot of games for a shit player. Especially when he's in a fucking region, it's not even his primary language. He's been playing every split of his career in Europe with, like, reasonably bad players for their level of the league. That guy's a fucking... I'll tell you what, maybe he's not a great top laner, but he wins a lot of games with bad players for someone who's everyone writes off. So if he's bottom of the pile, fucking top lane stacked. And like I said, most of the teams actually that didn't make the playoffs had competent top laners, some of them even good. Yeah,
I think the only other argument I'd put in for someone who like wasn't a great top laner is Soaz this split. He just didn't have a good split. He's an amazing player, right? But in terms of
especially relative to his career, obviously,
he just wasn't good, right? Like,
sure.
But yeah, I agree. Like, if you look at the rest of it, Cabo, Chachi, Whippo started to step up. Odo
even Expect was pretty decent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best parts of that
It's definitely been a good Wonder. I think Wonder, especially like in the last couple of weeks, has really stepped up. So top lane is looking fucking stacked.
Yeah. So going back to before I got endlessly flamed.
You mid suck, guys.
No. Yeah. If you go back and just dissect this split and this split, EU mid wasn't as strong as it used to be, and I think it's a lazy narrative to always just be like, oh, every split EU mids are great. Every split EU mids are great. Because this was a split where I don't think EU mids were as insane.
No, because here's the thing. That's a straw man. That's a straw man as well. Because the straw man there is like, it's a lazy narrative. You never explained why, right? Because even you just fucking admitted the pool is good. So like, here's the reason why it's not bad. Is I didn't say, oh, EU has like 9 good mid laners. Like that would be the straw man. You would just have destroyed their Loco. My point is this, and in fact, I would use your own argument against you. So we had 3 pure rookies. Pure. Some of them haven't even played with any of the other players that are in their team, right? They come in the league. First of all, they're not even the worst mid laners in Europe. And a couple of them, I'd say overall, Nemesis and especially Humanoid, they were actually pretty solid. I think they did pretty good under tough circumstances. Like Nemesis came in the number 1 team in all of the West, probably ever, and actually performed pretty decent. He wasn't caps, but he didn't have to be. Like, if that's the level of the rookies, mate, NA teams would fucking cream themselves if they could get like fucking Nemesis or Humanoid.
Of course,
you guys would go. You were literally hyping Demonte after 3 games, motherfucker. 3 best of ones.
I did not hype Demonte, and also going
you
back,
were loving it. You were loving that guy.
Comparing it, like
you were building franchises around this guy.
This isn't a way to compare NA
you were
and
like
EU.
Fucking Jerry Jones giving Dak Prescott that contract. You daft motherfucker. Go on.
If we're comparing NA to EU, I would actually side with EU, and I would say EU myths are much better. Like that's just
how magnanimous. There was only the entire history of international League of Legends results, to back it up. But thanks for giving us that coin flip there, Loco.
Doran, think of the 3 rookies that came in, like Humanoid, Nemesis, and
Abadage, yes.
And then think of the mid lane.
We know for some reason your brain could only store 2 of the 3. So even if you said Abadage, I was waiting for the 3rd one to be different. Yeah, I was waiting.
And then think of like the mid laners that exited. So the mid laners that exited would be Perks, Niski. Who else isn't playing this year from last year? Perks, Niski. But
is that it?
No, there has
it must be
because 3 new people came in, so 3 old people have to at least leave. Exile. Yeah,
but I mean, Exile played a little bit. Yeah. It's just Special came in for him.
It's just the players that left the pool are stronger than the players that joined the pool. So I think, and also some of the people within it, Zizuke is definitely having a worse split than he did last split. So I think I can confidently say EU mids aren't as good as they were before, and it's been more EU tops that I've been really, really impressed with.
Okay, wait, who else did we lose? We lost Blank, and I think any of the new mid laners better than Blank. Yes. We lost Betsy. I think any of the new mid laners are better than Betsy. We lost Selfie, who is like probably the same level as any. Yeah, he was. It's the same as any of the rookies, right? Like I want to give Loco a bit of credit because I understand what he means, right? Yeah, like the pool is more dilute, right? However, the top level of our mid laners, I think, is better than it's been, right? Like, Caps and Nuke Duck are playing the best they've ever played, in my opinion.
The mistake I made there was I was a bit unfair to NA actually Medic, because I didn't realise that the only way NA can complain about the EU mid lane pool is to be like, well, you don't just have 10 fucking sick players that would all be the MVP of my league. It's like, yeah, my bad, you win. Fucking. In that case, I guess you win.
I mean, eventually we will, because they'll all be playing in NA as imports, right?
Of course. Mate, I've always told them this. They never knew this, because this is why Americans don't think ahead, right? I always told them, listen, I've been pulling for fucking Cloud9 and TSM to go deep in these worlds. Because who do you think the carry is? Exactly. I've got to, like, you have to realise that's like another fire in the iron in the fire I've got. It's like, as soon as Jensen ever does anything, yeah, guess what? You're welcome. Because we all know if that had been someone born in America with an American passport, there wouldn't be any fucking playoffs at Worlds. Then if you go and, that's a fact, by the way, you can go and look it up. No one with a passport from America has ever made the mid lane of fucking Worlds in the top 8, except TSM, where they were directly seeded there. There you go. Reginald was the last one.
I gave up on
region.
I gave up on NA Myth because I was going to compare, maybe if I compare top 3 NA Myths to top 3 European Myths, maybe NA is better. And then I was like, okay, who are the best 3 Myths in NA?
In what world?
Bjergsen, Jensen, Niski. I was like, wait a minute. Bjergsen, Jensen, Niski. What do they have in common? So
exactly.
NA mid is a foregone conclusion. We can visit that maybe in years.
Mate, all you need to know about NA mid is this: Froggen plays on a team with almost nobody and is about to finish like 4th or 5th place in the 5th place in the LCS. Enough said. Like, you don't even need a team. Enough said. But anyway, let's go on. So let's double back then, because the one thing is we discussed Fnatic and Vitality, but except for Medic, like just saying that Fnatic would 3-0, we didn't actually go into that matchup. So give us some more about the actual matchup then.
All right, Medic, why don't you start?
Sure. So I think if it was 3 weeks ago, I'd say Vitality have a chance by getting an early game lead by trying to accelerate probably through the bottom lane, like get a Tiller something like the Draven or the Lucian pick and go for like a bot lane heavy style. But now Voxer has shown that he actually knows how to jungle in the early game again. He's able to track his enemy jungler really well. And then Whippo is usually left on an island in games like this. They'll leave him on an island versus Cabochard and they'll focus jungle mid, get priority, get into the enemy jungle, and then really just shut down Vitality in the early game, in my opinion. And then like Fnatic can decide whether they want to play like they did against G2 and just accelerate the game through getting turret plates bot, rotate top, get rift held, turret plates top. Or if they want to scale for teamfights, which is what they did a couple of times, and then just play a teamfight scaling AD carry, put Reckless on, Sivir or Tristana again, and win the game like that. I don't really see a chance for Vitality in this matchup.
I agree with you, so I'm not going to add more onto that. One thing I want to talk about is, so when you get broken, when your girlfriend dumps you, like you're just like, oh, and then you
right, here we go. Get the popcorn out again. Get it out again.
when you meet like a new girl, like sometimes you're not over your old girlfriend and you're like, oh, this isn't how Becky used to do things. Oh, I miss Becky. Like, if Becky was here, she'd be doing it like this. And you don't really move on and embrace like the new girl that's in your life. And you're just like so hung up on your ex-girlfriend, right?
This Becky sounds like a bitch. She just ruined you, mate. You shouldn't have gotten so deep. Yeah, you should have retained some of yourself. You should have had a little bit of stoicism in your life, Loco. You should have said, listen, Becky, as we get to know each other over the years, you know what? Listen, if we get married, 10 years down the line, I might tell you all my emotions and all the insecurities I had. But for now, I'm a man, you're a woman. Let's engage. Let's have good times. Let's build a relationship. I can't just I've noticed that all of Loco's analogies is just pure codependency from like day one of the relationship.
I often find the best way to have a relationship is not to share your emotions with the other person.
Of course.
That's definitely the most conducive way to a healthy relationship.
It is. You gradually work your way into it, You don't just come straight out like, oh, I'm scared that I might not be enough of a man because when I was young, it's like, fucking hell, homie, I just met you 5 minutes ago. Like, I want a good time as well. There's no fucking movie, Loco. Think about the way women's movies are, all the romantic comedies. There's no romantic comedy where the woman meets this like super good looking guy. He's like fucking Chris Hemsworth, the guy who plays Thor, right? She doesn't meet him. And then like after 2 dates, he's just like crying next to her like, I don't know if I'm actually good looking or not. See, that's never happened in any of those movies.
That's what Fnatic was doing though. I feel like Fnatic was just like letting like Nemesis just like they were airing him out. Like they weren't playing towards Nemesis. They weren't giving him resources. And it just felt like they were always talking about Caps. In the interviews, they were talking about Caps. I mean, everyone was asking about Caps.
Oh, they were, for sure, yes.
But yeah, like, Caps dumped Fnatic and he was hooking up with G2, and Fnatic was just like pointing at Cass,
Oh,
being
by
like,
the
"You're
way,
having such a great time."
As a quick aside, someone actually made this point to me. I think it was on Twitter or something, and it's actually a great point I hadn't thought of, which is, so I can't remember where this was discussed. That's the problem. I can't remember if it was on stream. Was it on this show actually, where there was basically a point where they had to pick between
Reckless and Cass.
Reckless or Caps. Like that was kind of the ultimatum, right? Which one's it going to be? Well, what no one thinks, Loco, is, well, what would have happened if Reckless had been the one to leave? Because logically, you might just put him in G2, and they might also have a super G2 from that, which would have been super hype. So actually, what's mad is it could have been amazing either way for G2. They couldn't really lose on that one, could they?
Yeah. But going back to it, like they finally started embracing Nemesis. I think Broxa and Nemesis start developing 2v2 synergy, and I think Hillsong started playing towards mid a lot more and actually enabling Nemesis. And it's like,
by the way, speaking of which, Fnatic just put out a piece of content where it was actually like one of their games, and you can hear the comms. And if you hear the comms, Hillsong does make a lot of the good calls. Actually, It makes a lot of them, like when they can go in, when they can do, yeah. That was interesting, because you so rarely ever get to hear that information, obviously, unless you're like literally like an LCS referee or something. Which, to be fair, if Loco actually knew how to exploit his own relationships with people in the LEC, he could have had that information, Medic. But he just talks to them about like, what fucking small Japanese children's TV show have you been watching? Do you eat Pocky? You know, your friend's a referee, you moron. She's listening to all the fucking comms. Why don't you ask her what they like in those teams?
Because that's like,
just ask Yuli. Come on, man.
That's rude. I can't, like, that's not like, I can't. Isn't that confidential information? I don't think that's fair.
I don't actually know. Yeah, it might be confidential information.
I don't think it's fair for me to ask like how their comms are. I guess she could describe it, but she couldn't.
All right.
Tell me, like,
so now you're going to start playing by the rules and doing things that are fair, not abusing personal relationships. Right, my bad, Loco. Starting now.
Okay.
It's the way this cock sort of dares say that. He was just talking to Korean coaches for the last half a decade. Like, yeah, what do I think? Yeah, that's what I think. And coming into NA, and they're all like, he's a genius, man. How does he know it?
I always been very open about what are they exchanging information.
Yeah, of course. Important. It was called a joke.
Yeah, but anyways, like going back into the whole Fnatic analogy, like they finally started embracing Nemesis as their mid laner, and they started to like play with him and enable him, and I think that turned around Fnatic so much. They look like a team where they just let their mid laner dry. But
I've got the analogy for you. The analogy was decent, right, Local? But here's the better analogy, right? Obviously, when they had Caps, because Caps was so proactive, and what's great about Caps is, like, if you don't play around him, he'll do the same shit and just didn't the game. So it's like, it almost tells you, this is how we're going to play the game, two Caps. And if you do, he's an amazing player. So as basically Youngbuck admitted when he came on my other show, like, they didn't even have to learn certain parts of the game because it just worked as is, basically immediately once they had the lineup fully set. And it was amazing. So it's like, we just coach around that. Like, we're just working what we've got. So when Caps left, that was like if tragically, right, your dad just passed away. He died. And then the problem is, your mom just can't, don't be a selfish cunt. Your mom has to eventually move on. She has to, go forward in life. So she gets a new boyfriend, right? And so what happens? Your 12-year-old Reckless, just a joke for his fans there. That's right. You might have a chance, guys. Like, your 12-year-old Reckless, and all of a sudden Dad's gone. And that's happened to you a lot in your life. There was Expect here, there was Hooney. They've all gone. They all leave. So, you're the one always sticking up for everyone. Yeah, exactly. So what happens is, when your mom gets the new dad, right, okay, you tolerate him at first because, it's for the sake of your mom. She's asked you to give him a chance. But, if there's ever any conflict or any key moment, you're going to be like, you're not my dad. Don't fucking tell me what to do. So what happens is eventually, Loco, that moment when you finally realise it's not just about you, and you know what, you've got to build a relationship with this person because everyone needs to be happy in his family. That moment when you finally just slip in there and you go, all right, Dad. And then he goes, oh, yes, so, yes, young Reckless. Now you can trust me. I'll never leave you. And then that's what happened with Nemesis. Yeah, there's the analogy for you.
And we all know next year, an NA team.
He's definitely going to leave. Yeah.
Nemesis, he'll go out for cigarettes, and then like six years later.
Yeah. And also,
his mum's name is Becky the whole time as well.
Like, the saddest thing is as well, the reason I do feel bad for Reckless as well is it's like, how much karma does he have to have for the one time he tried running away from home to go to Elements and it didn't work out? It's like life's just been punishing him so hard since then. It's like every time he gets the really good lineup, for no reason, it just gets split up for no reason.
Just quickly coming back to the Caps point, I've talked to a few people about like how much he shot calls for the team and how much he does, and he'll shot call fights that like he's not in, or like he'll be focusing on his mid lane 1v1, and then he'll be like, "Oh guys, I see you're fighting bot. Braum no ultimate for 13 seconds. His flash is 10 seconds away. Exhaust is 15 seconds away." It's just like how on earth he keeps that level of knowledge in his brain. It's just astounding to me, and it makes sense that Youngbook is saying he just kind of gels because he has all of this information in his brain. He just like feeds it to the team when they need it.
Yeah. The thing is, though, I do think like in line with what I said earlier about like the lazy way they do coach of the split. This is one of the only times that logic would work of like the team with the biggest turnaround, except obviously it's in the split, not from the beginning to the end. The team with the biggest turnaround is Fnatic, clearly, because they just never fucking lost any games once they got rolling. They beat all the top teams. And the crucial thing is, it wasn't like, even though the results say they just instantly started winning, over the wins, they get better and better and better and better. Like they start off with like, this is a band-aid. Oh, will that work? Will that hold them? Oh, okay, you've got that champion. But when people ban that, it's like every time they had a question put to them, they passed it. So when you look at how bad they were 3 weeks in, I would say Young Buck's the coach of the split, mate. I think he's done a fucking amazing job. I think it's him and the Splice guy for me. It's him or it's, I think, Duke from Splice. These are the two people where I think they made their teams really good by the end.
You don't think the SK guys, what if it deserve anything?
Mate, even they didn't think their own coach was the coach of the split at any point in time. Enough said.
Okay. Well, we jumped across everything, so I think to cap the Fnatic versus Vitality. Yeah, I agreed with what Medic said, and Fnatic has powered up so much where I think they could even match Vitality early aggression if they truly wanted to play that way, but that goes more into 50-50, and they can just play their better mid and late game macro style. They've been good at it, and they know how to play around the map. So yeah, I think this is the matchup where I feel most confidently predicting a team, and I think it's going to be Fnatic 3-0. At worst,
the big problem I also have with this matchup for Vitality is like the worst lane in Vitality is the bot lane, and Fnatic is absolutely fine not having to play through their bot lane. So it's like I don't see where you get an edge there. Like it's going to be really tough. Like for me in this series, they're going to have to do all the stuff I said earlier. They're going to have to get like exactly the right champion on Jizuke. He's going to have to get like the right edges early in the game so that they can keep up the tempo. Like Kabashad has to basically be the MVP of the whole fucking split in this series as well. Like this is so tough because now that Fnatic not only got good, but most players in the team are in good form again. Now everyone remembers this was a team of like all-star players pretty much. It's fucking hard.
Even if you play through Cabo as Vitality, right? Whippo spent 4 weeks of the split being left on an island by his team, right? He's very happy just to sit by his tower and farm up while the rest of the map destroys. Like Fnatic actually were the strongest early game team in terms of pure numbers across the last 3 weeks of the split.
3.3k
so I have no
in the last
concerns
half,
for them.
I think 3.3k gold lead at 15 minutes. Like that's fucking crazy. On average, you're up 3.3k gold at 15 minutes. That's crazy. And also, one thing great is I've been like a Vitality hater throughout the whole split where I don't like their style and I thought they would slow down and I thought they wouldn't be as good. And now it's finally happening. And other people
feel validated.
Yeah.
See, I actually made the sad mistake there, Medic. This just shows how actually, like, you know, over time we all do change a little bit. Because I thought for a second he was going to go, but, you know, as the split ends, I have to give them some credit, whatever. Nah, straight back to pettiness. Like, validation for me. All that matters in the end, guys, is I was right. So, right, here's the interesting thing, though, Loco, is remember, what a lot of people, especially Americans, might not be aware of is this is the first split in the LEC to have the new format.
Oh, yeah.
And the new format means we have a third matchup already, which is that the top two teams play each other. And the best way to think about this is, right, it's like the normal playoffs for the other teams, right? Except that only the winner of those other four teams collectively, so the first match and then they both play each other, the winner of that will carry on and can basically finish third, second, or first. All the other teams, it's like they're already decided. For the teams that are the number 1 and number 2 seed, they play each other, and the loser drops down and plays the team that's won out of the last 4 we mentioned, basically. So if you're the 2 winners teams, it's kind of like you get a lower bracket, basically.
Yeah.
It's like a single elim plugged into a double elim bracket, but only for the top 2 teams. That's the key thing to point out. Everyone else can't afford to lose. But as a result, we get this really unique match where on the one hand, we're just going to immediately get number 1 versus number 2, which obviously is a hype matchup. And in fact, that's what always sucks when there's an upset, right? Is you don't get the matchup. You've waited the whole season for like Fnatic versus G2, and then sometimes it's another team, and you're like, what the fuck? So you get it no matter what. You also can potentially get it twice, which would be very unique. Never have that before. The only league I think's ever even done double elim was LPL, actually. They did it a couple of years back. And so you can get it twice. And then also, now it's the case that like any of these teams that come through from the bottom part, as it were, if any of them win it, because it looks even more epic. So I don't quite know, because I've learned with formats, because in CSGO, by the way, Loco, we have a lot of different formats depending on the tournaments and which year it is. I've learned with formats, you can't like jump on the bandwagon immediately, because you have to see it play out a few times to figure out like what the flaw in the format is. But this tentatively looks really good to me. Like, I love the fact that we're going to get number 1, number 2 immediately. I think that's sick.
Also means you don't get a shitty third place match like finals as well, right? Like,
because it's basically a real third place match.
Exactly,
to count.
right? We call it the semi-final is what we're calling it. So the loser of 1-2 versus the winner of the rest plays in the semi-final on the Saturday. And it just like, it makes it so much more fun to watch as a viewer. Like, it's going to be great.
Also,
anyone who's ever watched the international knows that that's like a way better aspect, because again, third place matches suck, whereas because at the international, the team that wins the third place match could still win the tournament. There's everything to play for still. It keeps all the hype there.
It's also like really good. It gives teams roles, and then like it really sets up storyline. Like if G2 wins that, if G2 wins versus OG, and then they're at the top, like the storyline of everyone like fighting to face G2, and then like G2 is sitting there on their thrones like kings, like waiting for a challenger. Like the storyline setup's also really great. So love this format. Let's see what the problems are with it. So far, it looks really great. And then going to G2 Origin, I love what's happened to G2. I absolutely fucking love that they stumbled at the end.
He loves that Mickey X has had like a really bad injury. He's fucked up individually. This hatred has gone too far, Loco. Can you just start fucking have some compassion?
Yes, that's exactly. I wanted Mickey X to suffer through an injury, and I got exactly what I wanted. I fucking
okay. We've got our soundbite. Cut it there.
Editor, cut that section and put it after him saying, "You know what I love about G2?" And then he goes, "I love it that Mickey X has had a thing." And then at the end, cut out all of us saying this and just go straight to the next
serious face.
I mean, I hate the guy, but seriously, like, it's unfortunate that it happened, but it sets up such a good storyline, and then it gives G2 a weakness, and then them also losing to Fnatic, like, just everything that happened, we were gonna have, like, G2 just be absolute kings, but the fact that they look mortal makes it so much fun for everyone involved. Like, it makes it so much more fun that G2 is beatable and that G2 has a weakness. And there's a big question mark also, is Mickey X going to be back? And if he's back, is he going to be still on form? Like, how's the synergy with Perks going to be? Like, how much practice time are they going to have? It makes it so much more exciting, and I love that something happened to keep the storyline interesting. Of course, I don't love that a player got injured.
I agree. I think like it's the first time since I've been casting at LEC that we've actually got an undecided top team coming into like playoffs. Usually like you have a team that's just like, well, we know this guy's going to win. I think if you were going to give it to anyone right now, you'd still probably give it to G2, maybe Fnatic, but it's so close at the top of the table. And like, obviously Mickey being injured sucks, but I also don't think that's the cause of all of their problems, right? I don't think you can put it down to the fact he couldn't quite mechanically do the things he used to do. I think you have to look at Jankos not controlling the early game the way that he did. You have to look at Caps in a couple of the games, like especially against Fnatic. He was like 1-6-1 on Zed. He just got hard caught out a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. And if they can stumble, if they can fall across a couple of games of a best of 5, maybe see G2 have to go into that losers bracket game.
Yeah, the thing for me with this one is like, it's funny, we set it up earlier where I was talking about like how Caps' impact on Fnatic was so ridiculous. They even admit themselves. It's like, actually, you know, we weren't even well-rounded in certain aspects of the game, which we never had to be. Like, he was never going to be a problem. You can see that on G2. Like, the second the dude got there, they were instantly the best. It was ridiculous. And obviously, it took Origin getting better and better and better till there was the contender for them. Because when the contender to G2 was fucking Schalke and then Vitality, it's like, those are not true contenders. Like, no one really ever believed those teams were going to... In fact, if anything, most of the time you looked at those teams and you were like, I'm just going to use these teams as an example to tell the other teams like the Misfits of the world and the Fanatics, like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, if these teams are ahead of you, you're never going to match the G2 that you're supposed to be against. But I would agree, if you look last year at the Fnatic that Caps was on, part of what actually was one of the downsides of the league was there was no true rival to them. They could lose a best of one, obviously, everyone can, but they were never going to lose a best of 5 series, that Fnatic. Like, even in the summer when they had the fucked up meta, it didn't even matter. They were still, by the end, the best team. It was ridiculous. So this is the one split where I even think stylistically this is such a sick matchup, because G2 is the team where it's like they can do anything aggressive they want because of how good these players are and how they all synergize together. So they're super dangerous to play. But if there's one team could withstand that and actually like find the right places to take a fight, find the right counters to do that, it's Origin. Mm-hmm. Now, the one downside for me is they're both really good teams. And I do generally think that what I like about the Origin team is like no player's like the best at his role, but they're all like, you know, they'd all be like 3rd, 4th, maybe 2nd, depending on what the role is. Like they're all really good overall, like average. But the problem is the player strength on G2 is fucking bonkers. Oh, they can literally just carry all over the map, Loco. They can have the best player at each role. Depending on what the game, it could just change. Like each game, it could just change. Oh, it's Jankos this time. Oh, it's actually fucking Wonder's got like the right pick for this one. He got rolling early. Oh, Caps is still fucking super sick. So it's like, I agree the stylistic matchup is good. It could be really hype. I would still pick G2. It's still a solid one for me. I'm like reasonably confident they'll still win this. But what I like about this is where I set up the part about the format, because that's the sick part. Because what you never got in League, because you didn't have the double elim aspect, we don't have it in CSGO either, to be fair, is one of the really cool things in Dota is since most of their tournaments used to be double elim, I often cite this stat for people who've never heard it, but one of the best Western Dota teams ever was the Evil Geniuses team that had like, depending on what year, like RTZ, Sumail, and then the main person was their captain, PPD, right? And the thing is, PPD was very, very good at like game planning for people and then adapting between series. And so this is a stat I often tell people. In his career, I think he won something like 8 tournaments. 6 of them were from the lower bracket. And in fact, most of the time from the lower bracket, he ended up playing a team that had eliminated him from the upper bracket. So the point was, you can play this guy once and he can lose to a lot of teams. But if he gets to play you twice, he doesn't lose. That barely ever happens. So I actually think that's the hype part. I think the best way this bracket could go is that G2 looks amazing, wins the upper one. But then Origin then gets a chance to play them again in the final, where they've already played a best of 5. They've got all those VODs to go over. You've got the players to potentially do it. That's the super sick like animated narratives. If you come back and you win that.
I love that as well, right? Like, having Origin G2 final is amazing, but then you don't get Fnatic in your final. And as an EU fanboy, right? Like I know where the viewers are going to come from. I know who's going to like draw more crowds, and like Fnatic G2 is a bigger final for me. Well, Fnatic Origin would be fucking sweet as well.
Luckily, as I said, Fnatic has to beat one of the two to make the final anyway. Yeah. So that will itself, it'll take care of itself if that ends up happening. I agree.
One thing
I do agree with. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I agree with the Origin G2 point though. Like I was thinking it through, and it's like, yes, Origin are this cerebral team. Yes, they're a solid team. They're very good players, but all it takes is one G2 member to step up in each game for you just to win it as G2, right? And how do you actually stop that? Especially in the bottom lane with like Patrick, who has never been to a playoffs before. Yeah, you've got Mithy by your side, but how much can you stop Patrick from being a little bit nervous and actually getting just taken down?
Well, he made that split in he was on the one in H2K where they made the split.
Oh yeah, but I mean,
and it doesn't really count. I agree. Yeah,
exactly right.
It's just an aside before everyone flames here.
No, you're right. But yeah, I've wiped H2K.
Well, no, actually, my mistake. Actually, we'll double back. Here's what we'll do, Medic. Patrick's never made a playoff actually before. Sheriff did.
Yeah, Sheriff did. Obviously,
his twin brother.
It's not Sheriff. This is Patrick. So.
No. The one with the guy that his twin brother that had the cooler name that actually understood, the way that aliases work.
So,
anyway.
So the really exciting thing for me about OG is I think OG is what TSM was supposed to be during the Zven Mithy era. No,
here's the thing.
What?
Listen, guys, I'm going to do you a favor now. I'm going to do you a favor, Loco. Loco by that is just using the Zven Mithy part as an analogy, right? He's giving a reference point. The problem is, because it's Loco, every single thing's about TSM. Right? You have to understand, when he's having problems with his girl, and he's going like, listen, the problem with us is, like, you are really beautiful.
You're like Reggie, drawing the red card.
I am a good guy, but the problem is, it's like Season 6 TSM at Worlds. Like, we never got it together at the right time, baby. Our timing was just off. Shit, but let's give it another go. And if it doesn't work the second year, then we'll kick double if that, whatever that means in the analogy,
Yeah,
Come on, tell me how this is like TSM.
Whenever I'm hooking
TSM
up, I
is
tell the
meant
girl, "Oh, call me head coach, baby." Oh my fucking god, fuck you, Thorin. So,
Mate, you say that as a joke, but are you telling me that you think the fans, if I ask the fans right now in the chat to say yes or no, do you believe Loco ever, just as a way to, just to retain that little bit of a thrill in his life, has ever asked the girl to let him cosplay as the TSM head coach?
what the fuck? Why the fuck would I ever do that?
Like, listen, I'm the coach now, and I'm going to do pick bands, do everything I say.
I hate you. Back to my origin.
Chat literally is just spamming.
Yeah, chat is just banging.
They know.
Oh my god.
See, I'm like fucking, what's his name? Like Maximus from Gladiator. Like, are you not entertained? And they are Loco. They are. So, anyway, how is it like TSM? Come on, the Xenoblade.
Give us this analogy.
So, OG actually scales up to a certain point, and then they do something, and then they do team fight, and then I think that's what TSM fans were expecting out of the Mitty team. Like, oh, we're scaling. We have Bjergsen, Zven, and Mitty. We're scaling. And then, we lost the game. And then we kind of saw that with Origin initially, where they were, I think, 1-4 in their initial games, and then they started ramping up where they went 5-0, and then they slowed down a little bit. But yeah, we finally got what a good Mitty team looks like again. They scale properly, they give up fights where they need to, and then they take the correct team fights later on. And I think that's very indicative of OG and very, very indicative of Mitty. So yeah, really good to see. And going on to the reverse matchup of G2, I think one person that doesn't get talked about enough is Wonder. I think there's so many games where Wonder just holds it down for G2, and Wonder is actually a core reason of like why they're doing so well.
What broadcast have you been watching?
Yes,
homie?
I mean, both Thor and
Mate, they're all in love with fucking Wonder. What you're about?
Okay.
I think you know the irony, Loco.
What? Amazing player.
The irony is, I think they go too far on Wonder.
Really?
Like, I actually think of all the players on that team, him and Perks are the ones that get to look, I actually think, a fraction better than they actually are. Like, I think here's an example, right? If you take another team that can play 1v1, like if you put Wonder on Vitality, for example, he'd still be a very good player. He'd still be one of the best top laners in Europe. But if you ever see any of the games where he just has to play a normal team fight and he doesn't have like a 6 split push champion and he doesn't get going, he can just look just good. He suddenly isn't the best top laner in Europe,
I don't think that's a Wonder thing, though. I think that's a G2 thing. I think their team fights are actually weaker than our top team fighting teams in Europe. Like, they played a lot of 1-3-1. They won a lot with it. And then when they started losing, they were drawn into team fights by teams like Splice, by teams like Fnatic, by teams like SK. And that's where they actually started losing games. So that's my only concern for G2, is if they get into a team fight series and if teams can drag them into those 5v5s, that's where they look a little bit weaker.
And the other thing is as well, Loco, you have to realise, like, not only does, like, unlike some of the other great top laners, Wonder has, like, arguably the best jungler as well, and then has all the other lanes filled. He has the dream scenario to be a carry top laner. And if you look at the champions he plays, you pop off on those champions, you're going to look like the hero every time, It's not like some of the shit that Cabochard plays. Like, he wins, and it's like, I'll give you the analogy. I like to watch battle rap, right? Where it's like two people prepare all their lyrics, and then they rap against each other. And when you watch it, right, you get people that are, like, really popular with the crowd, but it's like, the actual rappers are like, he's pretty good, but he's not the best, But then you get some people where it's like, the crowd is, like, only half reacts, and the problem is their bars are too good. And it's like, what happens is, what you have to look at when that guy's rapping is the other rappers, and they're all going like, that's sick, That's what Cabochard is. Like, half the shit he's doing, you actually have to be like a coach or like a fucking high-level player to really know how sick he is. It's obvious that Wonder's carrying the fight. He's literally killing people on your screen and going off.
I think the G2 Fnatic matchup where he dodged Cartisol definitely put his stock up. But so when I watch EULCS, I never almost get to catch it live.
LEC, please.
Yeah, LEC.
By the way, I just want to say, just as a quick aside before we move on, like, I imagine there is just some girl out there who's like, oh yeah, listen, I don't know if I'm ready for a relationship yet. My ex was like, he was really weird because he always used to say that, like, he always used to call me Bjergsen, but said, like,
oh my
now
god,
he's
fuck you.
Okay. And I never used to know what that meant.
Becky.
It's like,
Becky.
yeah.
So, anyways, I think the recent G2 Fnatic match put up Wonder stock a lot, and whenever I do watch LEC, I have it muted and I'm watching double speed because I'm doing VOD review a bit, so I'm not getting to see what the casters are actually talking about. But yeah, whenever I looked at Reddit, whenever I looked at Twitter, it was a lot of just Caps getting so much credit, and then people
yes, that's true.
People talking about Zonko, so I didn't realize Wonder was getting so much credit. But yeah, Wonder deserves the credit. Like, Wonder has been so exceptional, and he knows how to split push. And I think it's hard to say Wonder's the best top laner in Europe because Cabochard puts up a really, really good argument, and it's between him and Cabochard. You can make a case for Alfari, like you can make a case for a lot of people, but one thing you can't make a case for is Wonder is the best carry top and Wonder is the best split pushing top. At those two, he is the absolute best in Europe.
I'll give you like a piece of info, which is like one of the ways I analyze this. Is, you know what it used to be in the early days when we were figuring out like what metrics do you analyze a player by, how do you explain on the broadcast to the layman, you know, that this is a very good player. One of the metrics that we often went with, which was a flawed metric, is just as, for example, with AD carries or mid laners, it can be very flawed to be like, look at the damage percentage checks. Then it means like, well, what champion did they play? Did they play around him? Did they play late? You know, there's like all these factors that can make it not as impressive. The one that often people went with was like, how many champions has he played or how many has he won on? So the reason why, and the analogy I'm going to give here is, there's no one actually thinks Nukeduck is the best mid laner in Europe. Like, no one outside of memes really believes that right now, but he plays the most champions of anyone who's a mid laner in Europe. But that's exactly why it actually ends up being counterintuitive. That tells you that he's not the best mid, because what's happening is he's having to get all these counter picks and weird matchups, and then that's contributing to why he's good but not the best. I would say it's a similar thing with Wonder. It's like in this team, because of how insane this team is, mate, go and have a look how many champions he's played. It's fucking... I looked it up right now. He has played... let me see. I think he's played 12 different champions in 18 games at top lane Loco. Mm-hmm. That's mind-boggling. But the point is, if you were in a different team and you were him, you're not picking all those different champions. Come on. Mm-hmm. Like, you're probably picking like half of those. Well, you've got some you're specialized with.
On G2, they flex so much, so like at a certain point, like one person's like, well, we picked this champion early, but we're gonna flex, so you're going to pick this champion. So he probably plays champions that he doesn't want to play due to
a couple of times he did. Yeah.
He played Sejuani top and Karma top, so I think like there's definitely a degree of flexing there. I also think like the second half of the split, G2 have kind of just been trying a bunch of shit out. Like, yeah, they've lost a few games and they probably didn't want to, but their ability just to have a little bit of a mess around after locking in week 8 or something top spot definitely means that they've tried a little bit more than some other teams may have done.
So I mean, to go back to like G2 OG matchup,
Loco, you must be loving watching top lane in Europe though. I mean, you were one of those guys only a couple of years ago having to fucking every day wake up and use fucking MK Ultra techniques to mind fuck yourself that Lolo was a competent top laner. Well, by the way, Steve, Liquid Steve, you will never live down trying to actually push that as a real angle. Like, listen, tell you what, when it comes to fucking checkbooks, contracts, all that stuff, you're wicked. You know exactly what you're doing. On the Rift, leave it to the other people, mate. Pay someone who knows more than you about the game to talk. Just saying.
But, yeah, I mean, top lane play in Europe has been great.
Everyone gets flameless, mate. My style is, I'm like fucking Carthus. Everyone just gets the ult at that point in time. Like, if you're just in the vicinity...
Yeah, we have our own Steve now in EU in Ocelot, so it's just like buy the wins as much as you can, right? Next year we're going to see Cabochard replaces Wonder, or they just have a sub top laner.
Well, that's the thing, is if you want to join G2, you obviously, like you would in any job interview, you say, well, what are the perks of joining? He says, well, the things we can just get any players that we want.
So going back to G2 OG matchup. Even with like G2 being shaky,
that was so bad.
Even with G2 being shaky, I'm gonna lean towards G2. I think Wonder split pushing is a
how bold? Go on.
I think Wonder split pushing is a definite like win condition that OG is gonna need to figure out an answer for, and I'm not sure how well they're gonna be able to figure out an answer. Like, when your top laner is that good and when your top laner can split push that well, it's really hard to have an answer for him. And even in like the Fnatic game, the world around Wonder was crashing. Like, Wonder was like 1-0 and rest of his team was like 0-8. Caps was like 0-3 on Zed. Like,
holy shit. When did you learn to say the letter Z? Have you been working on that?
I can say S and Z, but I have to like focus on it. Like, so before I speak, if I'm like, oh, I'm about to say a Z word, then I can say it.
Because by the way, that's not even that's not a riff on him having a speech impediment. That's literally what Koreans normally can't say. I didn't notice you could actually say that. Well done.
Anyways, Zed was 0-4 and the whole world was crumbling around him, but Wonder still did his job. He never got caught out and he was always able to split push and had those sick Rides ult, dodging Karthus ult at the end. So I think the Wonder win condition is always going to be there. And then for the rest of the team, I do think Mickey is going to be able to step up and be able to play. Yeah. So my experience with wrist injuries has been Bjergsen, Dardoch, Lorlo. If you get physical therapy and you do the stretches and you get the tape on, you are able to recover. And none of them have permanent damage, and all of them were able to recover. And they were able to get to like a being able to play point by 2 weeks. And I think G2 is going to spare no expenses to make sure Mickey X is recovered properly. I'm not sure the extent of his injury. I'm not sure if it's the same as all the players I coached before. But I'm going to bet on G2 being back to their normal power level and just having so many win conditions they can play around. One, they're team fighting, like getting an edge in draft and taking early leads. There are just so many different ways that G2 can win. And I think OG can only win in very few ways, which is like team fighting better than G2 and scaling to a point where their comp is going to be better than G2.
Also, one other thing I would throw in as well is like normally when I see a team does what G2 did this split, my biggest fear would be like, well, it's very easy to do that when you're like, you think you've got all the best players, you win all the early games, and then you have the amazing lead. Like, towards the end, you don't care if you bleed a couple of games, you're going to be number one anyway. But in the playoffs, you might think like, but would you really do that under pressure? That's the one good thing, is because you have caps. Like, that go button is just being pressed 24/7 anyway. Like, he's not going to just cool off. We've seen in his career, he's going to do all that. Like, that's the funny thing about this guy, is he is such a nightmare for coaching staff, because you want to tell young players who come into your team, like, don't do things like he does like that, because you'll actually throw the game, as he did himself early in Fnatic sometimes. But if you are as good as he is, it's like you have to let that guy develop, even though he's doing things that seem wrong as a coach, because if he does, he can become a player like this, where it's like there's no other player compares.
It's the same as like a Messi or Ronaldo in football, right? Like you can't cage that beast. You have to let them do their own stuff, and every now and again they lose you a game because they fuck up. Every now and again they lose lane because they fuck up. But if you cage it, then you restrict like 20-30% of the actual true power of the player.
Yeah, and but you have to be genius level talent, and Caps have shown that.
Yeah, exactly. That's the problem. Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Anything else you guys want to add on to G2 for OG, or G2 versus OG?
Well, one thing I will say is interesting is like, because they do have like still very good players in most of the positions. I even think actually like lane wise, it's a pretty interesting matchup, because like Alfari, he's one of those guys who is like, he also fucking lives on an island. He knows exactly what to do against any kind of lane. Like, it's a guy where, as a laner, it's one of those players where I don't mind if people downplay some of another part of their game, or they have like one, you don't think the pick was good or something. But in a sense, he reminds me of some of the players I like, where it's like they don't really ever have really bad games in that sense. Like, he's just very his low level is fucking very good. Like, his bad games are like LCS average. That's it. Like, he's never going to be legit bad. LEC, I guess I should sound that one there. Oh, it wasn't actually supposed to be intentional flame there. Like, it was a pretty good burn if I'd meant it, but it wasn't. It was supposed to be legit. And then Locodoco, like I said, the guy has every champion in the book. You can find some nice matchups in this series, I've no doubt, especially when they're on like whatever red side, I'd assume. Like, in this world, they can get what they want. So, and then you look at the bot lane. The bot lane, in theory, is one of the only potential weaknesses for G2. Well, as you said, that's one of the positions. They've got a rookie ADC in that sense. Not really, but you know what, they may as well do. So, like, actually, I think it's kind of interesting in how that works overall, because there's a lot of like similarities as it is. So, at least be interesting. Like, it's one of those games where even if G2 stomps the series, I bet it's still a pretty interesting series. Yeah. I doubt it's a boring one.
I agree. I think the Origin prep time is actually really important as well, because they have break week, then they have another week, and then it's into round 2. And like, that team has shown us they can prep really well. I think they do a lot of the same stuff that Astralis does in CSGO, and apparently having similar coaching staff and similar techniques has really helped them out. So I'd be very interested to see how they come in, because I don't expect them to have like a 1 game plan. I expect them to have a 5 game plan. Like,
So I actually really wanted to ask about that, the Astralis thing. So I think it's called like Refresh, whatever
Refresh, yeah.
their parent org is called. So they're supposed to be, I mean, years ahead of other esport orgs, do things differently than other esport orgs. I don't know what they do different. I just heard about it in interviews about the management being good, Refresh being really good. Do you think if OG wasn't under Refresh and they were on like a different org, or they were with like different management, they wouldn't have gotten to this point? It's like the Refresh system, whatever they did, like that, was it that effective if you just look at the 5 players on the lineup? If you just look at these 5 players and then we send them to a different org, let's say these 5 players join Misfits.
I'll give you an analogy.
Finish second?
Because one of the things that actually even people in CSGO don't know actually is that some of the things that Refresh is doing with Astralis were actually done by one of the first really great teams in Counter-Strike in 2003, so 16 years ago. Because they actually, what happened was, in the early days of Counter-Strike, the best teams were Swedish, right? Bizarrely, this was like, that was like the Korea of CS in the early days. As in, they were literally that dominant. Like, there was one tournament in the early days in 2002 where the top 3 teams were Swedish. Even though, you know, there was like Germans went, Americans, loads of teams. The top 3 teams were all Swedish. It was just what order they were in. And one of the things that this one Swedish team did, which put them like slightly ahead of even their peers, was they already had, because they had like people you'll know, like Heaton, obviously very, very famous player. And the thing was, this team, because they already had some of the best players, and crucially, the 2 players they had is duo called Heaton and Potty. And they were players where, because they'd won so much in their career and so early in their careers, they got that like awesome mentality where like all they cared about is winning. Like they weren't playing to just be a good player, or they weren't playing to be like, yeah, we're in pretty good form. They were like obsessed with, because we've won all these times, like if we come second, that is shit for us. Like, you know, I'm putting my whole life into winning. So they legitimately did it even back then. So what they used to do back then, which at the time was revolutionary, was when they would finish their games, they would go to bed at 10 p.m. And then when they would get up in the morning, they would have a proper breakfast, and they would only drink water during the events. They wouldn't drink soda. They would never drink energy drinks. And by the way, not only back then was it very prevalent that people, like, for example, if someone won a big game they didn't expect to win, they'd be staying up all night talking and having fun, and then the next morning they'd be tired. Or, you know, they'd have 2 Red Bulls for the game one at the beginning of the game, at the beginning of the day, and then by the end of the day, they're all wrecked. Like, everyone was making these mistakes. And I can tell you, to this day in CSGO, if you knew some of the players who are fucking superstar players who win tournaments, that, like, they're in the club with me after day 2, and I'm saying to them, fucking hell, don't you play about 5 hours? Yeah, but we only play team such and such. Yeah. And you know what? The problem is, Loco, they still do win that game 80% of the time, so I can't hate on them. When they do sometimes lose it, I do sometimes see them later like, come on, dickhead. You can't blame anything else except... So the point is, right, the stuff they're doing, so basically, they have, like, offices that you play from. Now, I know a lot of teams now have that, but, like, you know, they have a scenario where it's like a practice environment you go to. Even though some of the coaching techniques they've done have been, like, stuff that wasn't tried. So in CSGO, for example, they actually did something people didn't even find out about until, like, 6 months ago. It was, like, genius, which is when they would scrim, they actually had their coach, who himself was like a very great strategical mind. They had the coach be the in-game leader of the team, so that the real in-game leader could also just practice as if he was a player. And that meant when they actually played the real games, he would be the in-game leader, but he also had like way better skill level than he should have. So they would try like all sorts of very like innovative stuff. Then they had not only a sports psychologist, they had a nutritionist who was helping you with your diet. And so like they had literally everything across the board. Like there's 2 things to say about that. One is like none of these factors are really going to make you win. Like if I took the Rogue team and gave them that insane environment, they probably still don't make the playoffs. It's like all those things, if you add them together, are probably like 1% each thing. But the difference is, if you do, like I said, like 8 things, and you could add 8% to your team, that could be put you over the top and make a good team really good, could make a great team unbeatable, as they have been in CSGO basically. So that's really sick in that regard. But it's like, it's not going to literally like win you the game entirely. So the other thing I would say, this is the second point, which is the key aspect to me, is you've also got to have a player who can actually do all that stuff. Like, just as I said there, part of the reason when I was saying there was some CSGO pros who like fuck around, they're in the nightclub, that guy would actually probably be a worse player if he had to buckle down like that. Because the whole thing is what he's basically telling you by his behavior, Loco, is like, I love Counter-Strike when I'm in the server, and I love it when I'm at a tournament, but I don't love it as a game entirely. Like, I like to have fun as well. I have to let off steam a little bit. I have to balance it out so I feel like I don't go crazy locked up in a room. So it also takes a very special kind of person who could go to bed every night at 11 p.m., who could eat only think about it. If you're a world-class video game player, and you're only going to eat the diet this guy tells you, that's a hard sell on itself, mate. Forget all the rest of the practice. Just telling them you can't have a pizza each night, or you can't have a kebab when you win the game or whatever. Like, this stuff's a tough sell. So I do think if you have the right team, you could do it. That's why I think they did a very clever job with the people they picked for this team. Look at the people they've got here. There's nobody here should be a problem in that regard. I think they did a great job pairing up system with player.
I think they also picked like a bunch of players that have got close to greatness, but are still super hungry for it. Like, look at Alfari, you look at Cold, you look at Nuke Duck, made his first final. Like Patrick, I've always heard as a very level-headed, like very wise guy for the fact that he's still only in his second year of like properly playing. And then Mithy, like exiled to TSM, didn't have the results he wanted, came back like even hungrier. Just actually wanting to like challenge, right?
There's a couple of narratives we have to take out there just to tease them for later, right? So one, if Mithy wins this split, first of all, Loco, what did I tell you on every episode early on in this show? I told you that all you have to do is wait, and Mithy will definitely become one of the best support players again, and one of the best shot callers. I told you. It wasn't even like I said, like, it might happen. I guaranteed it. I told you that would happen. I told you players like that can't be bad for a long time, because the idea is like their approach to the game means they will improve, they will fix stuff. So if Origin wins the split, if you think it's bad now, TSM fans, it's over for you after that. If Origin wins this split, Europe is going to be insufferable forever. Because basically, what does that tell us?
That NALCS
it wasn't Mithy, homie. It was you.
NALCS
it was all of you.
No, it means that NALCS is really competitive, and when top-tier European players come over, they struggle due to the high level of competition.
Really. Like that Niski guy who went from like
struggling so much at the moment on my back. You remember when it's just so competitive here.
You remember when that Niski guy went from being like sort of the 4th, 5th best mid laner, and now you guys are like fucking raving about him. Like, he's incredible.
That's because NA grows really good mid laners, and he kind of excelled when he went over there.
And then the other one this is the other one. Here, you know what the best actual argument, it's not really, it's actually a mad narrative that would tilt the fuck out of any analyst. Like, any coach would get too about this. But as a fan, this is a great narrative. The reason why Fnatic has a really good chance to win this split is because G2 has Jankos and OG has Nuke Duck. And just as if you drop a piece of toast, it has to land butter side down, well, that's the problem. They can't win. And so the only way they can win, and by the way, this is actually a funny concept because it's a concept that comes from StarCraft, is in StarCraft they had these people who famously finished second a million times, and they were called Kongs, right? Yeah. Well, here's what people don't know. It happened in both Brood War and it happened in both StarCraft 2 as well. The Kongs did win eventually, a whole bunch of them, against each other, because again, someone had to win. It's like, if we're both chokers and we both can't win, if we play each other, it's ideal. One of us has to fuck it up. So similarly, Fnatic doesn't have either of those placements, so they can just waltz right to the final, win again. At that point in time, if you are Nuke Duck or Jankos, it's like,
give it up.
I'd start working on like alternate dimension technology or something. Like, this one didn't work out for you guys. Like, it's like Rick and Morty. You need to just like wipe this reality and just go to another one.
Steve, how much are you paying for new mid laner this split?
Exactly.
I don't know. I still think NA.
By the way, Steve, here's one thing you should do, mate. If you want to one-up Ocelot and get the best players, I'm going to put all the narratives together, mate. What did Ocelot do to get all the best players? He took 2 of Europe's best. Just get 5 European mid laners and have 4 of them role swap. There you go. There's your new team.
Is Jensen a native yet? You count as NA resident?
I think he counts from Summer Split.
Yeah. Okay, because then you get Bjergs and Jensen, 2 imports, and you just need 1 more to stay around for a while, and you're good.
I don't know. I'm still with NA is really tough, and then you have championship European players coming over and they struggle. Like, we have world champions like Core JJ, Impact.
No, you're right, because it's all about perspective. For you, NA was really tough. I know that, but it
was for the European players that came over.
No, what are you talking about?
We'll see. Okay.
Was it really tough for Bjergsen? Was it cocksucker? I thought he literally handed you 2 LTS trophies. You whack little rat. Was it tough for him, was it? I don't think it was somehow. I think it was pretty fucking good.
Dude, you bet.
Mate, the bad Sven Skaren won like fucking 3 LCS titles in a row. The bad one. When he was at his prime, he couldn't even win the LCS in Europe.
We were having a bet because you thought it was ridiculous that I said TSM would finish first. So you thought it was difficult. Not just... That's your own worst, Oren. You thought it would be difficult.
Sense.
We had a Lord bet because I said TSM would get first, and you were like, no way that fucking happens.
Right.
The Lord bet happened.
You weren't around at that time, right? Season 4. Right, no. So you're probably wondering about this, right? He just heard that I had a bet with Loco that that TSM wouldn't win the split, and they won the split. So I was obviously wrong with the bet, right? Mm-hmm. Do you know what Loco didn't bother mentioning there? What is that in the meantime, they brought in a player at support who was literally an OGN champion, had been, done so many things in his career. At the time, was still good enough, by the way, to be a supporting career, but chose to come to NA to play with Loco's team. Loco didn't bother mentioning that. That's because you have to realize Loco's system, right, is, I'll give you an analogy for how Loco argues. You know when people find like a really weird thing on a map where it's like these 5 churches make a pentagram or something, it's like, ooh, who constructed these churches? The joke someone once made, as like a legendary comic book writer called Alan Moore, is you can make any geometric symbol on a map if you have a small enough map and a large enough pencil. Because the joke is, the smaller the map is, like, it's just going to cross loads of, but if you made it big, it's like, well, that doesn't really fit. That's how Loco argues. Is like, he goes, right, if I remove that fact that doesn't work in my theory, and I ignore that, and I don't even mention that, then actually I'm 100% right. He's one of those people, like Fnatic fans. Are you ready? He's the Fnatic fan now who's like, why don't we get credit? Like, we've won every game in a row. Except all the games we lost. It's like, yeah, all TSM fans, we're 9-1. Yeah, the other games still count, guys. Like, I don't know if you saw the record. Like, those are still on there. Like, if you're 9-1, then you won the league, right? Oh no, that's right. They'll go out.
I don't know. I saw Lust Boy play, and he wasn't amazing. Like, he was just a very good Nami player, and probably carried that team to the finals. So.
Again, though, mate, he was a support player in NA.
He's not Becky.
Like,
I think that's the important.
You have to realize, like, support player in NA.
Yeah.
Come on, son.
You can't really do much, right? How hard can you carry your team?
I think it was really good coaching that carried them over.
The head coach is really good.
Yeah.
I've always given you credit, Loco.
Yeah. Well, anyways, let's go back onto LEC. So, what is you guys' final matchup, and how do you guys see like the brackets playing out?
Well, it sounds to me like Medic actually was setting up to say that he does think it's going to be G2 Fnatic in the final.
So I think it will be. I think G2 beat Origin 3-1 is my assumption. I think Origin have a game plan and win one game, but then I think G2 just mechanically outplay them. Fnatic beat Vitality, Splice beat SK, and then Fnatic beat Splice because of early game. And then we get Fnatic. Actually, Fnatic Origin's tough to call, in my opinion. That's like, with Origin having so much prep, I think that's the only hard one, but I'll give it to Fnatic based on momentum and recent early game performances, although Origin's early game has actually been pretty strong. And then I think G2 win 3-1 in finals.
Versus Fnatic? Versus Fnatic,
Okay.
Yeah. So I think the really easy one is, out of the 4 teams, Fnatic makes it through and join the top 3.
Oh yeah. I think
that one's super easy. So Fnatic, and then G2 versus Origin. I did say earlier, I do think G2 is going to win versus Origin in their first best of 5. So it would be Origin versus Fnatic. So I'm at the same point you're at. Man.
It's a really tough call, right?
Yeah.
This is the issue for me, right? It's like, I have G2 making the final no matter what. In fact, I actually personally think G2 probably just wins the split. So
I agree.
The main issue I have is this, is when you do the Fnatic Origin one, I have to, like, here's one of the things. I personally don't think anyone in the world's unbiased. It doesn't exist because, like, for example, for anyone, I'll do a very quick version of the rant I've done a million times. Like, to make any sort of meaningful analysis, you have to create a hierarchy, and you have to decide your hierarchy of which factors you rank over the other ones, which is inherently biased.
Yeah.
You are not being unbiased. So the point is, it's not that you're not trying to be biased. It's like what you're trying to do is account for your own bias and then realize where it would go too far. So my problem is this, and I've always admitted it, is when a team is really good. So in League of Legends, it's like macro, or their ability to adapt, or the ability to shot call. When that is really, really good, I will nearly always edge that over being good in any other aspect of the game. It's the same in Counter-Strike. Like, I'm famous for occasionally overrating some of the teams that are like very, very tactical, but it's also why when a team's amazing in the tactical, like, I actually tend to be able to get on track with that like earlier on, So it has an upside and downside. So my problem is, in my mind, Orion can always find a way to beat Fnatic, even if I don't know what it is. But I would say, like, Fnatic might overall be a more dangerous team. So I find that a very, very tough one. That actually might end up being the most interesting series in the whole playoff.
I think it'd be super exciting. Yeah. I have the same thing. My bias is towards good storylines, though. So if you give me a redemption arc or you give me a comeback, like that's
and obviously
that's
Caps versus Fnatic is that is the final. Of course,
everyone in LEC is praying for that. I know everyone in LEC is just praying for Fnatic versus
I'm
G2.
entirely unbiased, and I just want the best teams to get through. And Fnatic's be one of them with G2.
If Fnatic's not in the finals, holy shit! LEC.
Also, by the way, this is where, like, sadly, even though we banter in Europe, I hope Americans have now realised, if they've been watching LEC, that banter doesn't have to be hurtful. Like, most of the banter they're doing there isn't really supposed to be hurt. Like, there's the occasional thing where, like, okay, maybe Upset and Attila don't like each other. Like, there is a little bit of truth to that. But, like, a lot of the other banter is just ribbing people because you won. And the whole point is, if they win next week, they're going to rib you. And it's taken for granted. It's not like the end of the world, like in America, where if someone makes one comment, it's like fucking the apocalypse, and we have to discuss it for 4 days as though we had some 24 news hour cycle. But here's the problem, right? Is sometimes I wish there was more bad blood. Like, I wish, right, that if, I'll give you an example, I wish that if G2 went to the final, played Fnatic, and they won, then when they're all going down the line doing, like, the handshakes, well, famously, what you always do if you used to be a teammate is you give them the hug, don't you? Yep. Because if you don't, you know you get roasted by Reddit, so you give them the hug. That's where I want, if G2 wins, Caps to just say something reckless as air, like, this is why I left.
Yeah. I hope you find
that's the sort of because I want to set up the summer split as well, Loco. I need that, you know. Or basically, it's the equivalent of, like, that fucking. I'll give you one of your dog shit anime references. It's the equivalent of that thing where, like, Sasuke's brother's like, "That's right, hate me, little brother. Come after." Like, he's trying to make him a legend, isn't he?
I mean, we have a little bit of that.
Weeaboo reference
in mic checks and stuff, right? Like, the first time Caps, like, killed Nemesis, solo killed him, we had a mic check. It was just like Perks is going, "Wait, that felt personal." And Caps like, "Yeah, it was fucking personal." And then we had it the other way round when Hilla sang,
"Hello, Caps,"
and Nemesis killed. It's like, "Hello, Caps." It's like there's a little bit of that sort of emotional edge to things, but I don't think we've got it to the stage where we're going to hear, you know, people bad-mouthing each other on stage just quite yet.
Sadly not.
No, due to...
We'll get there, we'll get there.
Due to the age of the guys, I think the only way it gets personal is when it involves girlfriends. I feel like for early 20s people, especially people in esports...
Like, Perks, you've got to really step up your game now, man. you've got to start taking away girlfriends. Well,
that's
Is this what happened with Becky, Loco? It's just like all of your stories revolve around.
No, I'm a very quiet, shy Asian boy. I don't.
Okay.
Not for me. Not for me. Maybe
spelt with a B or I. Exactly. Perfect. There you go.
Oh my god. But yeah, I would love to see it be more personal and be more fiery too. I think sometimes even LEC is a little too cordial or a little too polite, and I love the Attila upset stuff. Like, Attila upset stuff that was actually personal. That was actually, like, they didn't like each other, and I wish we got more of that. Like, back when old CLG, old TSM, Hotshot and Andy fucking hated each other. They legitimately really, really disliked each other. And until it was the whole, whatchamacallit, like LCS Forever, the franchising, like, letter, and then, like, they grouped up, like, they fucking hated each other. And then, like, Andy would laugh about CLG's failures, like, oh, they're so bad financially, they only have their League of Legends team. Like, they genuinely wanted CLG to do badly, and we don't get shit like that anymore. But, like, with franchising and with everyone getting paid so much and everyone's just like, I mean, when you're poor, it's a lot easier to have beef. But when you go back and then you look at your bank account and you look at how many zeros there are, like, it's really hard to give that much of a shit against, like, someone saying stuff.
We had Gilius around for a while, and he would, like, hardcore BM other players, but then, like, Reddit just kind of jumped on his back and told him off a lot of the time for it, and so he stopped. And, like, I would listen to your thing recently, Thorin, against pro players looking at Reddit and using it as a guide stone, right? And I agree with what you said there, but you also, if people want more of that stuff, you can't jump on the bandwagon and be like, hey, you did it against my favorite player, so I don't like you anymore, right? And if Gilius goes through and then deletes all of his tweets afterwards, is like, oh, I never said it, then obviously jump on the bandwagon. But if he's there standing up for it, win or loss, got to give the guy some credit when he wins, and you can shit talking when he loses.
I wish Gilius was better. And I wish he was more confident about his shit.
The problem is this, Loco, is like, that's the real issue, is that Gilius wasn't a good enough player to justify it, especially because he did it all the time. And that was the issue. Like, the problem is, if he'd have actually had, like, the skill set of Yankos, then by the way, then he would literally be either the most popular or the most hated player in all of the West. Like, it would be a blockbuster player just from that alone.
He'll be the most talked about. It doesn't matter if you're hated or loved. If you're talked about, like, that's money. That's what people care about. Yeah.
That's actually the reason why, to tie it in, that's the reason why, no joke, I actually do feel like if there's one NA player should come to Europe, it is Dardoch.
Yep.
Dude, we would love this guy here. No one would give a fuck about the shit talking. As long as he doesn't literally ruin the team environment, he can talk all the shit he wants.
True.
Josh has also been polite. And like, getting bounced off of teams has kind of like softened a little. Like, you have to be fucking good from the start. And you, like, I think Doublelift's like a perfect example of it. Doublelift was pretty good from the start. And the only time he got shot on was when he played versus Asian AD carry. So he could just shit talk over and over again and really made it his brand. And it's sad that we don't really get players like that. Like, Perks and Caps are close to that, but they've toned it down a little too.
By the way, can I just say as well, like, I know Reddit isn't one thing, but the whole thing is, if you are someone who's well known, you don't have time to like learn every name that's commenting. So you are going to take an aggregate of what Reddit says, and you're going to your brain go, that's what Reddit was like today, right? I will just say this. If you want a proof of how utterly wrong Reddit can be, and the idea that the joke on Reddit, I noticed they don't really do this in League, but in CSGO, the joke we always make is like, oh, every CSGO Reddit is global elite. Like, they're the absolute best players, like, they're 100 times better than me because, like, I'm not a pro player, so of course they're better than me, and they know everything about the game. And like, they all build themselves as some super expert. But if you want to see where the mob, as it were, can just be consistently wrong, just go and look at Doublelift's career right up until he won that first LCS split. Mate, like, by the logic of how they were treating him, this guy literally must have gone and, like, fucking found, like, Excalibur out of the fucking lake or something the day before that final. Because, like, the night and day transformations, they were talking like he was the biggest loser ever. And, that, like, people were literally, I don't even think he is one. Like, people would go to the extent of, like, is he even one of the best AD carries? It's like, well, you can say he doesn't win, but holy shit, like, he's still a very good player, isn't he? So, like, and then obviously he not only won, he's now won so much. He's tied for, he has the most LCS titles ever. So it's like, you guys were consistently the most strong you could ever be.
You see it a lot with like anyone who starts winning, though, right? People are shit until they start winning. As soon as they start winning, they're good. I realize one other player that we need to bring back is Forgiven, by the way. If we want shit talk, we want someone to I hope it happens, man. I hope he doesn't
especially because in his case, like, what I love about Forgiven is some of these other guys, like Doublelift, because he's matured as a person, he doesn't trash talk as much now legit. You can even see by the way he does it with like a smile, like he's doing it for the crowd, like he's giving the crowd a show, or, he's actually going out of his way to make that there's a big deal between him and some other AD carry, whereas really there's not. Like, he's a legend and that guy's a good player. As long as he doesn't talk shit to him, it's fine. The difference is, Forgiven's not acting. None of that's acting. Like, in fact, I'll go ahead and say it. I know him. He's worse in private. Like, in private, he's never lost a single game that was his fault. He's never met a single player that was better than him. I've told people this. This is not an exaggeration. He literally thinks he could beat Uzi Eye straight up. He believes it. He really believes it. The two of the players who are two of my favourites, Loco, that's one of the reasons they're my favourites. It's the same with Froggen. You found it out the hard way, mate, when you thought you could bring him on that show and tell Froggen to his face that he's like not that good in LCS mid laner, and he absolutely fucking tore you up, homie. Because you know what the mistake you made was? You tried to debate with him about specifics of how to play mid lane. I mean, I would say, I don't know if you're aware of this term called hubris, Loco, but when I debate things with people, the reason I don't normally get embarrassed is I don't go to their part of the territory and fight them there. I bring them to my part, like a narrative or a story or something I noticed about their team. They haven't. You literally tried to go to Froggen and sit down and go, let me explain to you why you're not that good at playing mid lane. And he was just like, well, this should be pretty easy. I'll be done by lunch, and fucking tore you up, didn't he? You could have had him if you'd have made it about other aspects, but he got you. He fucking flamethrowered you.
Speaking on Froggen part, I still do think he's extremely stubborn, extremely headstrong, and still wrong about some of the arguments that we had. But
really? Yeah. Ever tried looking in a fucking mirror? How did you nail all that, eh? Are you one of those people who, like, you hate in other people the things that you really secretly despise in yourself?
Everyone does that. The thing you hate about other people or the thing that you won't admit about yourself.
Yeah.
And So Dorian must not be very happy about himself due to amount of hate in here. Anyways, I'm going back.
It's all right. Here's the thing: you just when he does a shit joke, you just let it fall flat, and then you wait a second, and then you continue. You go right, okay, whatever. You gave it a go.
Oh my god.
We can get that out in the edit. It's fine.
We can tell Loco must hate humor.
Yeah, he hates like so many.
By the way, he fucking butchers it every single week.
Oh my god. You know, one thing that Reddit and chat says is I'm reverse Luffy. I'm not sure if you guys watch One Piece. So in One Piece, like Luffy is this character. He's like the main character.
Right.
And everyone just wants to fight for Luffy. And then whenever people meet Luffy, like they want to be like his teammate or Nakama. I feel like anytime we bring on a guest, the guest and Dorian immediately gang up on me. And the chat also, like the chat loves fucking roasting me. Like
thing is though, to be fair, because I'll just tell people, we did actually mention that in like the pre-show segment. But that's the thing, Medic actually was polite to you. What he did was he waited, he analysed the teams, then you dared to start telling us about EU Midlands, and then I just, I turned him loose at that point in time. Like, at that point it had to be like an absolute 2-on-1.
And even then I was like, I understand where you're coming from, but you're entirely incorrect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh,
it's understandable.
I guess we're done with most of the topic. I wanted to ask about LEC.
By the way, can I just go ahead and say, Loco?
What?
Right? Sometimes on the show, I'll make like a literary reference, or I'll reference a classic piece of cinema, and it just goes over your head, goes over the audience's head. I'm not hating on people who like anime, right? Some anime can be pretty good. If it's something you do on the side, like for example, I'll tell you an interesting detail I didn't know, is I actually learned one of the reasons why so many people are way more into anime than I ever was. Because when I watch something, I watch it as though it's art, right? So I was getting some of these fucking animators, and I was sitting down, like turn the lights off, like put it on the big screen, sat there and I was watching. And obviously, like half of it's filler, isn't it? So I was watching and going like, the fuck, this writing's terrible, like this character's not interesting, why would I keep watching? What I didn't know is, like in the modern day, for example in League, because League, unlike CSGO that you have to concentrate on, in League, you can sort of like have a dual monitor setup and be, you can be watching and do that. So the difference is actually anime is ideal for that, because that way if you miss a tiny bit, who gives a fuck, you just keep watching, right? But I will say this, like, if you ever wonder why you're a little bit deficient in those areas, haven't quite read as many books as you could have done, haven't seen as many great movies, those 800 episodes of fucking One Piece that you watched? 800! I feel like that's excessive. I feel like that should be its own hobby, just One Piece. Never mind anime. If you've watched that and Bleach, fuck your life. You're never going to know anything about this world. All you're going to know is One Piece and Bleach. That's it.
Yeah, but when you meet other people that watch the same anime as you can talk.
Yeah, I'm trying not to do that. I'm trying to, exactly. You said it like as a positive.
I think that's a good goal in life, though.
I know. But when you meet other people who also watched 800 One Piece, I can imagine what a sick fucking conversation.
Talk about one topic for the next 10 hours. Excellent. I've already got League of Legends occupying my life, okay? I can spread everything else out a little bit.
Okay, so the thing I wanted to ask you about was, do you watch LCS? Do you watch the broadcast?
I watched some of it, yeah.
What do you think of LCS broadcast versus LEC? Not the gameplay, just the broadcast.
So I think I like some of the moves you guys have done in terms of trying to be a little bit more creative with your segments. I feel some of them are a little bit too contrived. The Kobe Weatherman segment stood out to me a little bit this last week because it didn't really feel like you were doing anything with the skit itself, right? The skit itself was purely we wanted to do something funny, and here's the information we want to give you. Whereas what I think we try and do with LEC is we think, what is actually cool and funny to us, and how can we make this like a humorous segment while giving a little bit of information across at the same time? Instead of being like, hey, it would be funny if Kobe was dressed up in a hurricane. Okay, what information can we put in that? I also think that a lot of your like post-game, pre-games is kind of by rote. So I can tell you how a broadcast will go, right? You'll do countdown, you'll probably do one funny segment, and then you'll do a draft, and you'll talk about the teams, and you'll have 2 advert breaks in there, because of course you need the advert breaks. And then you'll do a pre-game analysis, you'll have an interview, maybe do a small post-game, you'll go into the next game, you do a pre-game analysis, or maybe you do casters, do both the lineups, and then you do a post-game, and it's just like, there's no inventiveness there. I think you're definitely moving towards it, and I don't want to like bash the NA broadcast because I think it's a good broadcast overall, and I really like the entire team. The thing I love about LEC is we try deliberately each week to make things feel special, and I don't always get that from the LCS.
Yeah,
the one segment I did like that they did in LCS was the segment where Mark's and that dressed up as doctors. And again,
awesome. I loved it.
You just copy in Europe. Don't ever fucking take Medic's fucking gimmick again.
I mean, we did it last year. So
exactly, you just stole it.
Yeah.
But it was
the way NA even has that reputation, it's the copycat region. It literally is. Even the fucking casters are just copying what?
The match of the century hype thing that you guys did for G2 and Fnatic, I thought was great. The Attila upset thing I thought was really great. There's like very, very memorable stuff that LEC does, and yeah, I do think LCS broadcasts can be very, very vanilla and formulaic. I love the addition of Crumbs. I think LCS, it's not that
definitely help.
We don't have good personality. I think we have great personality. I think Kobe's hilarious. I think Crumbs is hilarious. I think Mark Z is edgy in the right way. Azale is starting to become more edgy. It just doesn't show because like everything is so formulaic. Like pre-draft stuff they do, that's so fucking boring. Even as someone that enjoys draft, I think it's boring, and I don't think it has like a lot of appeal to the general audience. And I wish they would.
They're making a mistake on that, Loco, which is this is the mistake. Is the way they actually did things is the perfect way to set something up. You learn all the rules. So in their case, they've obviously taken a lot from like sports broadcasts in America and the professionalism and the sheen and the polish and the production. They've done all that part, right? But the idea is once you know the rules, now you can fuck around a bit. Now you can be a little bit more loose, because the idea is once you've already got a host who's really, really experienced, once you've got desk analysts who've done a million segments, if you do a fun segment or a creative thing, it doesn't land, you can switch back to the script then. You can go back to that, can be the lifeline. But you don't want to only do that, because then it will naturally mean you can't have spontaneity. Like I always tell people this, if I ever do a good joke, because people try to be like mad haters no matter what I say, people just try to claim that I like thought the joke up earlier. It's like, no, all the jokes are just in that moment. But that's the point. If I'd had to have written it down, it wouldn't come off the same way. It wouldn't be as good. It might not, the timing might not work. You have to allow some room for spontaneity, because that's where some of the most memorable shit comes from.
That's actually at the start of this split, I got a lot of hate from Reddit for my casting and like my style, and it's because I was trying to force shit too much, right? I was trying to think, how can I be edgy in this moment? How can I be funny in this moment? And like after week 5 or something, I was very deliberate in saying, don't plan anything, just let it happen. And that's when people started liking me, or kind of liking me again, right? So I totally agree with you there, Thor, in that if it feels too manufactured, if it feels too like it's come out of a factory, it's never going to be as genuine as something that you're just bringing out on the moment.
Yeah, like, dude, I hate fucking the cooldown. I think cooldown can be so much fucking cooler. Like, the whole Scion runway and, like, all the stuff they do, like, instead of that shit, like, get Doublelift, get Beard, get Hunter, get Svenskeren, get Biofrost. They're all on different teams now. Get them, sit down and get them to talk about, like, the old TSM games. Like, stuff like that would be so fun and so cool to do, and they can't do that because, teams can't fucking do that because they can't force Fierxen, Doublelift, and all of them to sit down and talk about it. But Riot can. Like, they can actually bring those players together and talk about, like, the golden age of TSM and, like, all these cool things that Riot could do. Like, and we get, like, Scion runway or, like, players doing, like, Play-Doh stuff. And, it's just, there's so many.
Funny thing is, you know, that actual analogy you gave there, which you could easily extend further, is something that is, I don't know if you, again, you'd have to know this sport, but if you know MMA at all, one of the coolest side pieces of content is Joe Rogan does a podcast where he brings in like fighters and his mate Eddie Bravo, who's like a jiu-jitsu master. And what they do is they watch the fights back that they've already seen, and they just chat over it as though it was like a director's commentary or something, you know. And they just like, you know, sometimes, by the way, if it's not interesting, you know, they have like a digression and talk about sometimes they talk about conspiracy shit. But the idea is like, even if you watch the fight, it's really fun content if you're into that sport. It's like super entertaining. And it's so easy to do as long as you can get the people in the room, basically, because it doesn't matter what they say pretty much. It's the personality that shines through.
That's always what I thought Lounge was meant to be, right? It was always meant to be just like a much more casual, let's just have a chat with some players, kind of interview them while we're talking about League of Legends at the same time. And I really enjoyed watching Lounge when it was like that. But then when it becomes more of a let's cast the game together, it feels that's not what the players are there for, right? It's I want to learn about the players. I don't actually really care that much about the game behind them.
Let's start closing out the episode. Medic, any final words? Anywhere we can find your stuff?
I'm on twitch.tv/mediccasts, Twitter mediccasts. I'm on the LEC. I do commentary stuff for that. Yeah, it was good fun. Episode 40, right, Loco?
Sure. Episode 40. It's gone long enough. Maybe it does become 40. Dorian, any final words, or are you just gonna play me again?
Just hope you get over Becky one day.
Yeah. Oh, here's you know the fucked up thing.
Becky's name.
Exactly.
So I actually did see a girl named Becky, and I wasn't trying to reference her. I was just trying to think of like random ass names, and I was like, oh my god. Sure. I said a name that I actually dated, and people might fucking
in the
roast
medical
me for
field, we call that subconscious bias. So what's happened is you've had a traumatic incident with Becky. Maybe something to do with head coach positioning, maybe something to do, you know. I don't want to judge.
Definitely head involved.
I don't want to judge, right? It's definitely head involved. and it's now seeping out in your everyday life.
Exactly,
And,
that was the problem.
There was definitely
Yeah.
seepage involved as well.
Exactly, that was the problem.
Can I get a second opinion? I don't trust this doctor.
I'll get Mark Z on the
Maybe
phone.
that was also the problem. Maybe you were trying to get too many second opinions, cocksucker.